My shit is on.
Yep, your shit's on. Is your light on?
Yeah.
Your light on? Okay. All right, you all set?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, denizens of the internet, we hereby welcome you to the second episode of the Revenant podcast. I am the Goon, and this is the Revenant. And our mission is for things to be the way that it was. More or less. Yep.
And it's been a great day today.
Yeah.
Had a credit card issue.
Mm-hmm.
Took care of that.
Yep.
Got my golf cart squared away.
Yep.
Life is good.
Life is good. Okay. And yeah, I guess whoever was there to step up to help you with all that must be a really great guy.
He's a swell guy.
Yeah, he's a swell guy. Okay. Well then.
And Sharky just dropped a mean turd.
Sharky, Miles' cat, who is
dear God,
who is the profile picture for the Revenant YouTube channel, is very gifted in the realm of personal hygiene, so to speak, of waste production.
Her nickname is Chernobyl. She dropped a shit pile in that litter box. It'll knock a man out cold.
It was quite something.
He walked right into it. He ate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. God.
I was right in the blast zone. Yep. Okay. Well, today for the this is our second episode. Our first episode, the pilot, was 6 months ago, and I've been a little busy, and so here I am. And so today's episode is we are going to discuss the casting of Lupita Nyongo as Helen of Troy in Christopher Nolan's upcoming The Odyssey, which has generated a certain amount of controversy on the internet. So, Miles, what do you think of the Trojan War? What is your opinion on the Trojan War, on the Iliad and the Odyssey?
I liked it.
Okay, yeah. Last week,
but before we move on, just let's make the point clear.
Yep.
Just beautiful women. Just that it makes or breaks everything.
Beautiful women make or break everything.
That's why wars are started in the
first
place.
That's why this particular war was started in the first place.
Yes.
The Helen of Troy was famously the most beautiful woman who had ever lived. And so let's start with Christopher Nolan, okay? He's the guy behind The Dark Knight, the guy behind The Prestige.
Of course.
Of Inception. Of course. Inception, Memento, all great movies.
Inception?
That was him, yes.
Damn. Okay.
Christopher Nolan, yeah.
I forgive him.
Okay. Well, of course.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway, so did you see the movie Oppenheimer?
No.
Okay. Well, I have to say, I saw Oppenheimer recently. One day I decided I'm going to sit down and watch Oppenheimer, since everybody I know had already seen it, except for you. And no offense. And the thing is as you might recall, the movie Oppenheimer and Barbie opened the same day. All right. So I watched Oppenheimer, and
I saw Barbie.
You did see Barbie?
No, I'm lying.
Okay.
Of course I didn't see Barbie.
Well, see, that's the thing. I watched Oppenheimer, and honestly, I did not think it was Nolan's best movie. And in fact, I think it represented a certain amount of sloppy filmmaking, honestly. It was the acting, of course, was brilliant. The acting was off the hook. You had Cillian Murphy deserved every bit of that Oscar that he won for this film. All the supporting cast was great. But it was 3 hours of near constant cameos. It's like, ooh, Jack Quaid is Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman being one of the most interesting physicists who ever lived. And these are both great things. He's on screen for like a grand total of about 2.5 minutes. You had Casey Affleck as an OSS agent who was Boris Pash, who was a notorious OSS agent who was an anti-communist investigator.
Now, I don't think a lot of people know what an OSS is.
The Office of Strategic Services. They know what it is if they've watched Oppenheimer. But anyway, the point is,
I'm just saying we're that's kind of for an older school audience.
It is for Oppenheimer itself was for an older school audience.
Yeah.
It was all about the making of the atom bomb. It was about the career of Robert Oppenheimer. And I thought it was a little sloppy. The atomic bomb blast came at like 2/3 of the way through the movie, and the last third was basically just Oppenheimer moaning about his life choices and being denied security clearance. And
Denied security clearance?
What?
He built the fucking thing.
Yes. You'd have to see the movie. That's actually one of the arguments they brought up in the movie. He won the war, and now people want to question his commitment to America, because in his youth, in his college days, he'd ran around with a bunch of communists, and his girlfriend Jean Tatlock, who was played by Florence Pugh, she was not only a communist, but she was also a psychologist, and she also killed herself, supposedly. But I mean, this woman was a veritable. She was party time of red flags. I mean, she was like a rally in Tiananmen Square in 1987. Okay, but so that actually kind of that will bring us to something later. But right now, my point is, Oppenheimer was a little sloppy. It was a filmmaker who maybe got a little too big for his britches. The climax of the movie should have been the atom bomb blast, because it was primal. It was core. It was beyond discussion. It was a moment of pure truth. Well, the actual climax of the movie was Louis Strauss getting denied his position as the Secretary of Commerce, which is why we're supposed to care about that. I don't know. So anyway, the little postscript, unless you'd like to say something, but I know you haven't seen the movie.
Well, one fucked up thing about the America dropping atom bombs on Japan.
Yep.
I mean, they deserved it. But what I was astounded, and I just learned this recently, was that for like the first 10, 12 hours after Hiroshima got wiped out, the Japanese high command refused to believe that shit.
That's right. They didn't believe it happened.
They actually sent a dude, one of their lower ranking officers, to do a flyby.
Yep.
And when the guy came back and said, "It's gone.
It's gone.
Hiroshima's
gone." Well, military doctrine.
They still wanted to fight.
Yeah, they still wanted to fight.
And I didn't know that it was the emperor who had to make the final vote.
Yep.
To say, hey, it's over, guys.
He had to lay the hammer down. Yeah.
You know, Hiroshima, then Nagasaki. And then,
yep.
And then the emperor said, hey, look, we're done.
Someone had to stand up and say, okay, that's it. We're doomed. We're defeated. There's nothing we can do to stand against this. And there really wasn't. At that point,
they refused to believe that one bomb could just wipe it all out.
Well, it was contrary to all military doctrine.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, the idea of weapons of mass destruction.
Because they had just recently firebombed Tokyo.
Exactly. They'd firebombed Tokyo. They firebombed Dresden, and these were pretty bad. But the scale of the atom bomb was unimaginable.
And my mother, for a little fact, my mother lived as a child. She grew up in Germany. She lived right outside of Dresden and watched the Allies firebomb Dresden.
Yep.
She said it looked like needles. When the bombers were over the city, she said it looked like needles falling from the sky. Wow. She said some of them were so low flying, she remembers a pilot waving at her when she was a little kid. They were so low to the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fucked up.
Messed up.
She grew up in post-World War II Germany. It was rough fucking life, man. Anyway.
So the Barbie movie.
Moving on.
So that night, I was telling my friends that I'd seen Oppenheimer, and they said, "Oh, you should see Barbie," because it was part of the whole Barbenheimer experience. That when Barbie and Oppenheimer opened the same day, so I watched Barbie, and
you saw Barbie?
I saw Barbie. You can't say that. I know what you're going to say. You can't say it. Not on YouTube.
Wonderful.
Of course.
You saw Barbie?
I saw Barbie. And honestly, here's the thing about Barbie is that
Did you tell me that before?
I might have.
I don't think you did.
Maybe I didn't.
I think I would have remembered
Well, then that's a nice surprise.
I would have given you a nice little label for that one.
Okay, well, The thing about Barbie movie is very confidently made, but the acting of all the characters except for America Ferrera and the actress playing her daughter, it occupies a point in acting that I would refer to as sort of an uncanny valley of behavior. I understand that most of the characters were in fact dolls, but the way they were behaving was deeply unsettling to me. And the set pieces in the doll world were just complete and utter visual noise. And it actually made me profoundly uncomfortable. And so I watched America Ferrera and her daughter. I rejoiced every time they were on screen because aside from the fact that they have a difficult and beautiful mother-daughter relationship, they were the only ones who weren't acting like complete psychopaths. And it was just refreshing to see normal people in that film. So America Ferrera, right on. And the little girl, I forget her name. So the point is I had the full Barbenheimer experience. And honestly, Oppenheimer being a little below par and Barbie being, again, very technically made, but something that to me was like nails on a blackboard. It was a little, I guess I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't do it again.
It made a shit ton of money, right?
It made a shit ton of money.
God.
Barbie, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. They haven't had a big budget chick movie in 10 and a half years. Okay? The problem is that the casualties of the modern day leftist progressives bringing down Hollywood is not that they're retooling everything to make it more women friendly. It's that they're trying to get women to watch male oriented properties like the Avengers, and they're failing miserably. In fact, the movies that are actually made for women, like say Where the Crawdads Sing or Barbie, they generate over 5 times their budget. Women, as I recall, when Where the Crawdads Sing came out, women were going to the movie theater in buses just to watch that show. It was based on a novel that was a Reese's Book Club main selection. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for something like 215 weeks. And Reese Witherspoon has this great scam where she has the movie rights to every book that appears in her book club, and she makes a fortune. Woman's very well. If she's not a billionaire, she's very, very wealthy. So good for you, Reese, and good for you for making movies for people you are vastly underrepresented in the theater. And trust me, we know what that feels like. Anyway, so today's thesis is my contention that Lupita Nyongo is in fact ideally cast for the role of Helen of Troy. That is, she is in fact the perfect choice for Helen of Troy because she is not playing Helen of Troy. My thesis is that Helen of Troy, at the end of the Trojan War, went off with Paris or Deiphobos or whoever and disappeared from history, while Menelaus married the daughter of the daughter of the Egyptian pharaoh Setnacht, and the sister of Ramses III, Theanoe, the princess of Egypt, and returned to Greece with her. So when Telemachus in the Odyssey meets Menelaus and Helen, Helen is a completely different person. She's an Egyptian. And that is where we present the Revenant podcast, episode 2. Black Helen. Or, Helen of Egypt. Either way. All right.
Helen of Mace.
Dude. Dude, we're on camera.
All right.
We are on camera. Stop.
Okay.
Stop.
Oh, I'll try.
Okay.
Oh, you can drive.
Dude, really. So, first we start with. You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You're having a seizure?
No, no.
You kind of sound like you're having Tourette's.
No,
Like that movie.
no.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay. At any rate, So I thought about this originally when I was at work one day, and I was thinking, wouldn't it make a great plot twist if Lupita Nyongo was actually playing someone who wasn't Helen of Troy, that she was actually playing another character entirely? Because what if Christopher Nolan's the Odyssey was in fact a direct sequel to Wolfgang Petersen's Troy from 2004, with Brad Pitt as Achilles, and Brian Cox as Agamemnon, with Diane Kruger in one of her early roles as Helen of Troy. That all the original characters were dead, and these new characters had arisen to take their place. I don't know. I haven't seen the Odyssey yet. And also, I have to wonder a little bit if the entire casting of Lupita Nyongo in the first place as Helen of Troy isn't a bit of misdirection. Because in the Odyssey, Helen of Troy is not a major character. She's there for like one scene. And I think the real question is, who's going to play Calypso? Now, Calypso is a far more interesting character in the Odyssey, because using the sex magic of her gold-plated punane, she keeps Odysseus a prisoner on her island of Ogygia for 7 years. Odysseus wants to leave, but he can't, because the sex is so divinely good that he is incapable of making the decision to go. And that's where I think they're going to cast Florence Pugh, okay? Because Florence Pugh in the movie Oppenheimer, well, I'm going to just be blunt, was very attractive. She had a scene where she was completely naked, and during a flashback, and her physical attributes are quite extensive. She is a very fine-looking woman. So if they're casting her as Calypso, and they've kept it secret, and they're keeping it secret, and using the whole casting of Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy as a little bit of misdirection, then good job, guys. Good job. But anyway, so I thought to myself, wouldn't it have been an interesting plot twist if Menelaus had gone back to Greece with Oenone, who was Paris' first wife? Okay. Now, the story of Paris and Oenone is actually a very tragic one. Okay, because Paris was married to a priestess who lived on Mount Ida named Oenone, and one day Paris has a strange dream. And this is the story of the judgment of Paris. In the dream, Paris is visited by 3 goddesses. There's Aphrodite, there's Athena, and there's Hera. And they say, which one of us is the most beautiful? And Hera says, if you choose me, I will give you power. And Athena says, if you choose me, I'll give you wisdom and prowess in battle. And Aphrodite says, if you choose me, I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the entire world. And ultimately, Paris chooses Aphrodite. And when Paris wakes up, he is no longer in love with Oenone. So they kind of break up and they go their separate ways, and it's very sad. So what happens is that at this point, Paris, his name isn't Paris, it's Alexander, and he's the son of a shepherd. Okay, what he doesn't know is that when he was younger, he was sent out of the city of Troy by his father Priam, because his sister Cassandra had a prophetic vision which said that one day Prince Paris will be the ruin of our city. And so Priam told one of his courtiers, take him outside the city and have him killed. And the courtier couldn't do it. He decides to go out and become a shepherd instead. And he raises Paris, who he names Alexander, into a man. And one day, King Priam tries to give away his prized sheep to the winner of a gladiatorial contest. Paris enters this contest because he wants his sheep back. And then he steals the sheep. There's a big chase. And then the father, when he chases us back home, and the father reveals that this is not my son Alexander, this is your son Paris. Priam changes his mind. He decides, okay, well, you're my son now. And Cassandra says, you really need to keep him out. And Priam's like, shut up, you You made me lose my son for many years. I'm not listening to you ever again. And of course, this was a bad idea because Cassandra, she was invariably correct. Anyway, so that brings us, of course, to the house of Atreus, hundreds of miles away in Greece. All right, the house of Atreus, or the Atreides, their house began with King Tantalus, who decided to have a banquet for the gods, and for some reason decided to serve his son Pelops as the main course. Pelops, yes. And
what's a Pelop?
It's his name, Pelops.
You said
It's the name of his son is Pelops.
But you said serve Pelops.
Yes, they're going to serve. He's literally serving his son.
Okay, I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tantalus. Pelops was the son of Tantalus, and Tantalus, for some reason, decides he's going to. I could look it up, I guess.
No, I don't want to.
Tantalus decides he's going to serve Pelops as the main course. Okay.
Serve Pelops as the main
course to test the gods to see if they can, I guess to test if they have an appetite for human flesh. I don't know. The guy was crazy. Anyway, so basically Hera eats the shoulder and says, "Boy, this meat tastes a little gamey." And they discover that it's the son. It's Pelops. So they magically restore Pelops' shoulder, and they condemn Tantalus in Tartarus. I believe they have him at the bottom of a pool, a dank, stinky, and smelly pool. And
like the one we walked into earlier.
Yeah, basically.
Jesus Christ.
And shoot, it's something like that. Tantalus. The word tantalize comes from the name of King Tantalus. So hold on, I'm going to look this up. I'm sorry, Tantalus. Okay, so King Tantalus was the father. Yeah, he was most famously for serving his son Pelops to the gods in a stew to test their omniscience. His eternal punishment involves standing in a pool of water with fruit above him, both of which recede when he tries to reach them, leading to the English word tantalize. He was a son of Zeus, a wealthy king, and the father to Niobe and Pelops. Okay, so he was the founder.
Who's the dude who could never get a drink? I thought that was Tantalus.
The dude who could never get a drink.
Yeah, they put him in a giant in a lake, and they gave him unquenchable thirst.
Maybe that's Tantalus.
And every time he goes for a drink, the water level would drop.
Maybe that is Tantalus, who could never have a drink.
I think that was Tantalus.
It might be. Yeah, it might in fact be. That might be another variation on the story. Okay, yeah, he could never have a drink or food despite perpetually being surrounded by water and fruit. Yeah, Tantalus stands in water up to his chin, but the water drains away every time he tries to drink.
See?
Yeah. Well, it's the same story. It's just, different ways of telling it.
Mine's better.
Okay, sorry. All right, yeah, very good. Okay. Very good. You remembered your mythology. Okay, so Pelops, the son,
oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Pelops later goes on. He has an ivory shoulder.
I'm sorry, I got to bring this up.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah.
I never heard the part of him having the trying to grasp fruit. All I knew about Tantalus.
Okay, well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
Whatever.
So Pelops wanted to marry Hippodamia. So in order to do this, he competed in a deadly chariot race against his father, King Ennomanus. And he cheated. He won by bribing the king's charioteer, Myrtilus, to sabotage the chariot, leading to the king's death. And after winning, Pelops refused to reward Myrtilus, who cursed him and his descendants before being thrown into the sea. The curse haunted his son, Atreus and Thyestes, and Atreus' son, Agamemnon. Now, Agamemnon is where the story begins. Agamemnon was a member of the cursed house of Atreides, which the curse, of course, was well known by Frank Herbert when he wrote the novel Dune, because according to him, the Atreides family in Dune were direct descendants of the original Atreides family. So, He was calling back to a mythological source.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yes. In
I
fact,
like that.
there's a scene in Children of Dune where Saint Alia of the Knife is communing with her ancestors in the awareness spectrum trance, and Agamemnon is there like, I am Agamemnon, I demand audience. So, one of the side effects of the spice melange is that it taps into what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. And supposedly in the collective unconscious of humanity are at the very least, bits and pieces of the memories of all our ancestors. Like they have somehow shaped our quantum wave function that defines our consciousness or whatever. So at any rate, the house of Atreus. Atreus and his brother Thyestes, well, suffice it to say, there's a whole Game of Thrones type thing going on, and Agamemnon winds up murdering Thyestes to become essentially the overlord of Greece. And Thyestes has a son named Aegisthus who comes into play later. But so Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus they have a very difficult path to kingship. So what happens is that Agamemnon marries Clytemnestra, who's the daughter of King Tyndareus of Sparta, and in fact murders her first husband. The King Tyndareus didn't seem to mind that all that much. Clytemnestra had a sister, of course, named Helen. Helen was supposedly also the daughter of Zeus. Daughter of Zeus? Going to double check that. I'm double checking my sources. Sorry. I started out not wanting to consult my phone so much, but inevitably I'm going to be on it for most of the entire thing. She is the daughter of Zeus and Leda. Okay? Leda, of course, was the wife of King Tyndareus of Sparta. Anyway.
Zeus banged that out?
Yes. Yes.
Good man.
Yes, indeed. Well, Zeus, I mean, he was a god. He was, all that stuff. Anyway.
Zeus said, as long as it's Arcturian, it don't matter.
As long as it are, well, I mean, Leda was apparently quite beautiful.
He banged it out. That's all that counts.
Now, what happens is, in order to solidify his rule, Agamemnon wanted his brother Menelaus to marry Helen because the Spartans were very powerful. They had control of the southern sea trade, and it was a strategically very viable match. And so what happens is that so Helen, being very beautiful, had suitors from all over Achaean Greece. And Greece at this point was not called Greece, it was called Achaea. And the people who lived there were called the Achaeans. And they bore, as near as we can figure, a very shady connection to the Iron Age Greeks, which came later on. And in fact, the Bronze Age Greeks may have been more closely related to indigenous European tribes like the Basques, and may have a common ancestor with the Berbers of North Africa. But in any rate, it's true.
Nothing.
Okay. You're looking at me weird. Okay, my bad.
The Berbers?
The Berbers were the native tribes of North Africa. They were, they include people like the Tuaregs, the Tunisians, some ancient Egyptian bloodlines may in fact be Berber, the Algerians, the Moroccans. The Moroccans, of course, were very successful. The Berbers, the Europe and North Africa were a lot more closely connected in the Bronze Age than they were in subsequent eras. And in fact, that's a bit of a tangent, because the Bronze Age is characterized, of course, by bronze. All right, bronze is made by mining copper and tin. Now, copper was kind of common. Tin was not very common at all, and there were in fact only about 5 or 6 viable tin mines in the Bronze Age world. So the irony is that during the Bronze Age, global trade was a necessity. You had to have ships and merchants bringing bronze, or that is to say, bringing tin to your smelting factories on a regular basis. And this created a very precarious balance. Because if you had, let's say, labor trouble in Cornwall, in southern England, where there was a big tin mine, then the Amorites...
Are you shitting me?
I'm not shitting you.
All the way from fucking England?
All the way from fucking England. I'm not kidding you. If you had labor relations problems, this is borne out by archaeological evidence. They have uncovered things like tin mines. They've uncovered Bronze Age coins. Shoot, I was literally watching a documentary the other day about Bronze Age Scandinavia. Okay? And some of the metalwork they had was gorgeous. They had, you know how they have the stereotype of the horned helmets, where the Vikings didn't actually have horned helmets. They usually just had the regular nasal. But in the Bronze Age, they had these decorative helmets with horns that were like 3 feet high, and they did all these recursive twists.
Yeah, I know they are decorative because in battle it would be bad.
Exactly. But
that could be used against.
Very much so. So Bronze Age civilization had a lot stronger channels of communication because, as I was about to say, if there's labor trouble in Cornwall, Babylon falls to the Amorites, which is more or less what happened. And bronze isn't actually necessarily worse or better than iron. The thing about bronze is that if you smelt it right, it can actually be up to 280 times more powerful than iron. It's just that iron is fairly common, and despite being brittle, it's easily reproducible. In fact, this is why the Hittites, which I'm going to get to very soon, the Hittites were a major trading power, a major Indo-European trading power in Asia Minor. They literally used iron weapons for their armies because bronze was simply too expensive to simply sit in somebody's armory. They sold it. They had a massive trade network throughout the Mediterranean.
What's the old saying? You go to war with what you have?
You go to war with what you have. And the fact is, they could more easily smelt iron in a hurry. And the reason that bronze stayed around so long is because, one thing, bronze is shiny. Okay.
I wonder if, like, the elites and the upper class, upper crust,
exactly,
if they would keep bronze for themselves.
That's exactly what they were doing. Yes.
Yeah, sounds.
Bronze weapons were considered a warrior's weapon. They were considered a weapon for a king. Your average Greek soldier or whatever, they had spears, they had shields. They would occasionally have old weapons, but your Achilles, your Agamemnon, all these guys had shiny bronze weapons, and the best money could buy. Except for the Hittites. The Hittites had iron, they had chariots, and they had the will to power. Which, again, I will get to the Hittites in a later segment because that actually is important later on. But anyway, so Agamemnon wanted to secure an alliance throughout the entire Greek peninsula and all the islands. And so Odysseus, he wanted to marry Penelope, who was the daughter of one of King Tyndareus' vassals. Okay? So he suggested to Tyndareus...
Would that not be considered a lowborn?
No, they were still of noble blood.
But you said a vassal.
A vassal, like a duke or a prince or
a
lordling. At this point, you had all the kings of Greece were vassals to Agamemnon.
Okay, all right.
Okay, they basically pledged their fealty to Agamemnon, and when he made the call to war, they would go and they'd follow him off to battle. In fact, you saw that. Before this podcast, we actually watched the movie Troy, and you saw the scene where Agamemnon is accepting the gifts from all the other Greek kings because they were his vassals at this point. And in fact, you remember at the very beginning when Achilles fought Boagrius, the loser was the king of Thessaly, and he basically said, "Well, I swear myself to you now. You're my overlord." So Odysseus suggests to King Tyndareus that in order to prevent bloodshed over the hand of Helen, that they would put on a series of games and contests, and the winner would win the hand of Helen but the losers would all swear to support the marriage and to support the winner, if the need arose. That if any one of them decided to carry off Helen, all the others would band together and they'd go after him. They basically swore an oath to defend the marriage. And King Tyndareus thought this was a grand idea. And he, in fact, let me find out who the father of Penelope was. I'm back on my phone. I'm sorry. Penelope, Greek mythology. Yeah, okay, background. Penelope is the daughter of the Spartan king Icarius and Asteroidea. So Icarius, as I said, was a vassal of King Tyndareus and married Odysseus in exchange for Odysseus suggesting the alliance, which essentially put all of Achaean Greece under the command of the Atreides brothers, being as that you had Agamemnon, who was the king of Mycenae. You had Menelaus, was now the heir apparent of Sparta, and he was married to Helen, and all the other Greek kings swore to defend the marriage of Menelaus and Helen. Okay? So then you have, at that point, you have the conflict that develops when Sparta and Troy Sparta was, of course, on the south side of the Bosporus or the Aegean Sea. Sorry. Sparta was on the south side of the Aegean Sea. Troy was on the north side of the Aegean Sea. They decided to make peace for the benefit of both sides. They eat, they drink, whatever. Helen has an affair with Paris, and they skedaddle off to Troy. Now, these stories are very confused at this point, okay? Did Paris drug and rape Helen and carry her off to Troy? Did she go voluntarily? We know the opinion of the movie, okay? The opinion of the movie says they fell in love, they made a difficult choice, they went off, there was all this drama. Honestly, Wolfgang Petersen's Troy, especially the director's cut, is a great movie. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, so now the consequences, of course, were that now Menelaus could go to all these Greeks who'd swore their loyalty to Menelaus and Helen's marriage, and because of their vow, they all get in their ships and they all sailed off to Troy to settle this old school. And that is where the Trojan War came from. And so the thing about the Trojan War, okay, was that in many ways it was an offense against the gods, all right? Because one of the bad moments was when supposedly Agamemnon, on their way to Troy, slays a bunch of deer that is sacred to the moon goddess Artemis, or the goddess of the hunt. And in order to propitiate Artemis, because the winds had fallen flat, there was no tailwind. They, for some reason, I guess they felt they couldn't row all that way. Who knows? So Calchas, the seer, Calchas. Calchas? Is it Calchas or Tiresias? So I'm back on the phone. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Iphigenia.
It's Calchas.
It's Calchas?
Yeah. But double check just to be
okay.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. So Princess Iphigenia relates preventing eldest daughter of sacrifice. Mythology. Calchas. Yeah, you're right. So Calchas yeah, he's right. Okay, that's 2 for you. You got it. 2 for you. That's for those of you keeping score. He now has 2.
And I'll be honest, I didn't have a fucking clue. I just took a guess.
Really?
I had a 50-50 chance.
You did. He did. Well, good for you. It was Calchas the seer. Calchas the seer told Agamemnon.
But I said it with such confidence. Oh, it's Calchas.
Yeah, well, it certainly was. So
I don't have a fucking clue.
Well, you're right. You were right.
Yeah.
You're right. Good for you. Good for you. You did it. So
yeah.
Calchas the seer tells Agamemnon, you have to sacrifice your eldest daughter Iphigenia. And
is she Arcturian?
She is not.
No.
She's Greek. And the thing is, there's actually a scene, if I recall it correctly.
You need a beer.
No, I got one right here. Hold on. Cheers to the two of you watching this podcast.
I'm going to get another beer. Keep talking, dog. I'll be right back.
Okay. So Iphigenia. So at this point, Menelaus at this point seems to have this attitude where he's kind of like Hamlet. He doesn't really want to get Helen back. Okay. The problem with beautiful women is that they're a lot of maintenance, and Menelaus would probably just as soon, as we saw in the movie, Menelaus didn't really care about Helen that much. He was more concerned with banging the servant girls and the dancing girls and all that stuff. I mean, wives were just for breeding, and he didn't seem that really hyped to marry Helen in the first place. He was only there in the running. In fact, he wasn't even at the contest to decide who would be the husband of Helen. Agamemnon was there representing him.
You know, the problem with beautiful women, we could sit there and talk about that for hours, but that's for another day.
That's another podcast, yes.
That is another story.
That is another story. Menelaus just doesn't seem that interested. So, and he doesn't really want to leave. Menelaus is a guy who enjoys the comforts of home. He's a guy who, he loves a good bang, he loves a good meal. And Agamemnon is kind of the alpha. You know, he's the guy who's like, I need power, I need control, I need all this, I need all that. So Menelaus, when Calchas confronts Agamemnon with the idea that he has to sacrifice his firstborn daughter, Iphigenia, in order to propitiate Artemis, Menelaus is like, yeah, dude.
Let me ask you something.
Hit me. Go ahead.
Who the fuck sits around and thinks this shit up where you got to sacrifice your first daughter or your first anybody? Sacrifice.
That's a very interesting question.
Who the fuck sits around and thinks that shit up?
Homer.
Okay.
Homer was the poet who is accredited with the creation of the epic poem, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad and the Odyssey are actually two books in what is called the epic cycle.
I'm listening.
The epic cycle is a series of books describing the Trojan War from beginning to end, and of which the only two that survive in complete form is the Iliad and the...
I'm bringing a guest cameo with Sharky.
Oh,
because
Sharky.
She's over here meowing and she's going crazy.
Look, hello, baby. Sharky.
Little baby.
Hello, Sharky.
Look, baby. Little poop monster. Anyway.
Yep. So the epic cycle, or the Theban cycle, it includes the Kypria.
What makes him want to fucking think of that shit in the first place? That's fucked up.
And I'll tell you exactly why. Audiences love blood and drama. Look at Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is the most popular show in the entire world. Blood and drama.
It was great for the first 4 seasons?
Yes, around.
And then it went right down the shitter.
Yeah, it did. But
then fucking doom on the assholes who made the last season.
I was actually
fucking incompetent mother.
Believe it or not, I don't know if you recall this, but I sent you a text a few days ago about the last days of Sparta. Okay, Sparta, the city, Iron Age Sparta, I should mention, is very different from Bronze Age Sparta. They were two different cities. They were actually in two different locations. They were very close to each other, but they were about as far apart as Teotihuacan and Tenochtitlan in Mexico. But
you know what you just made me think of? And we spoke about this in the last video.
What's that?
The two tribes in Red Nails.
Yeah. What is it? The Zodolancas and the Zodolancas and the Toltepecs?
No,
shoot.
The Zenwachi.
No, it was not the Zenwachi.
Oh, you're not falling for that one?
No, I'm not, because I know it wasn't the Zenwachi. It was the Zodolancas.
It wasn't the Zenwachi?
And the gosh darn it. It was, excuse my language. The
Toltemecs. You know, I've been down
to the Tocotli. I'm sorry, the Tocotli and the Zodolancas.
Tocotli.
Yes. Okay, the Tocotli and the Zodolancas.
But the pyramids, I've been one of the pyramids down there in Mexico, man.
You can actually, back in the old days, you were able to climb the Pyramid of the Sun and the Moon. That's at Teotihuacan. The Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan.
I don't know that destroyed. One. The one I went to is like about an hour and a half bus ride outside of Mexico City. That's
Teotihuacan.
Okay.
That's Teotihuacan. I've been there too.
The coolest part was they had a mule drinking beer. You put a bottle of beer in his mouth, the mule would upend it.
Wow. So,
but anyway,
thousands of years of Mesoamerican civilization all led
by a mule with a beer.
To the mule that could drink a bottle of beer.
And besides, when you're down in Mexico, you want tequila, you want hotties. But anyway.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, but I am proud of the fact that I was able to climb the pyramids of the sun and the moon before you were no longer able to do so.
You know, I know for a fact I've got a picture of that.
Yeah.
Of all of us. We were like not at the very top, we were at the mid level.
Okay.
Or one of the mid levels. I don't remember. Like back in 1995.
All right.
It's a long time ago.
Anyway, Sparta. The last days of Sparta. Because Sparta was famously never conquered by the Roman Empire. And the reason for this is because Sparta was an ally. Sparta had been an ally with Rome from the jump. And in fact, it was Rome who came to Sparta's aid on more than one occasion. And when the Roman Empire expanded, Sparta, as an ally, was autonomous. It had its own tax structure. It had its own tribute structure. And the reason that Sparta became...
Hey, and I'm sorry to...
Sure, go ahead.
Dumb question.
Hit me.
Did they have their own separate coin?
Yes. Yes, okay. They did. Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did. They did all that stuff. But the thing about it is that during the Roman era, Sparta became a tourist trap. It became an amusement park for Roman tourists. And one of the most popular attractions, in fact, they literally recovered the building, an amphitheater where people could watch the Spartan manhood rituals. And not just anyone. There was a very specific audience that thought the Spartan manhood rituals were the bee's knees, and that were Roman matrons. Roman matrons in their togas and their wine and their coterie of other wives would sit and flutter their hands breathlessly.
And coterie is the buzzword for that.
Yes, coterie is the buzzword for today.
No, the next 6 weeks.
The next 6 weeks. Yeah. Fair enough. They would just be all aflutter as these strapping Spartan boys whipped each other into a frenzy of martial lust. And this was big money to the Roman tourist industry.
Now, when you say these dudes were whipping each other, I remember reading specifically that was part of their training.
That was part of their adulthood initiation rituals.
Just grit.
But see, here's the thing. They weren't warriors anymore. They were performers. They would literally undergo these sort of caricatures of the ancient Spartan manhood rituals for the benefit of their Roman audiences.
I didn't know that.
That's true. Now, the thing about it is,
shit.
I'm dead serious. It was a tourist trap. And it wasn't just, the manhood rituals. It was their warrior performances. It was their martial training. It was everything. To the Romans, the Spartans were like a Renaissance festival of Iron Age Greece. They were pre-Alexander. They were from the Golden Age when Greece was in flower, the Peloponnesian War. And the Spartans, the native Spartans at the time, would put on these elaborate performances that, as I said, were caricatures of Spartan military traditions. And they would even have games where they would reenact the 300 Spartans. They would reenact, famous battles. They would wear nothing. They would be naked except for their shields. And apparently the Romans who went there to watch had a wonderful time. But it's because they love blood and drama.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? So the reason you have all this blood and drama in the... you know what? There's a postscript. There's a postscript to this. In the terminal period of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, the Roman legions, when the Romans were defeated in the Battle of Adrianople in the Teutoburg forest by the forces of King Fritigern of the Goths. something like 78,000 Roman legionnaires were all massacred.
They had 2 lost legions.
No, that was in Britannia.
Okay. Oops,
that was in Britannia.
My bad.
Yeah.
All right.
That was in Britannia. No, this was much later. This was the Battle of Teutoburg Forest.
They weren't fucked up again.
They were murdered. They were drawn into the Teutoburg Forest by the forces of King Fritigern, and the Goths set upon them like a plague of locusts, murdered them all, stabbed them in the throat. It was brutal. At this point, the Roman Empire of
Who was that German dude
Yeah.
that they brought in, raised him in their courts, in their system?
I'm about to get to that.
All right, so I'm on the right track.
You're on the right track.
All right.
Anyway, so
yeah, he fucked them up.
So King Fritigern, there was nothing between King Fritigern and the gates of Constantinople. And he sent his 2 cavalry generals, Alethius and Saphrax, the kings of the Greuthungs and the Thervings, south to the Attic Peninsula, that is Greece, in order to disrupt any possible supply lines or shipping, if possible, to Constantinople, while he headed there to lay siege. Now, records at this point are somewhat unclear, but there is a rumor that there was one army that stood between Alethius and Saphrax and the utter devastation of the Attic Peninsula, and that was the Spartans. The rumor has it that the Spartans banded together one last time to face off against the Goths. And nobody really knows, because we do know that when King Fritigern got to the gates of Constantinople, we discovered that his army had been defeated, so he got out of there. And then 19 years later... Chicken shit. Well, I mean, his cavalry was gone. Either they ran off, or maybe they were defeated by the last great army raised by the Spartans. Maybe when those Goths with those giant black armor and those giant black horses faced for the first time in 1,000 years a row of Spartan hoplites or phalanxes or whatever it is, they said, "Oh, finally, people worth killing." I'm quoting Stellan Skarsgård from King Arthur right there, who played Cerdic the Saxon. But anyway, the point is, what Miles raised earlier, 19 years later, Alaric the Visigoth, who had been raised by the Romans in Roman society and returned home to raise an army to tear Rome to pieces once and for all, Alaric the Visigoth sacked Sparta 20 years later and left nothing standing. And that was the end of Sparta. Anyway, back in time, 2,000 years, all right, and the Greeks launched 1,000 ships to attack Troy, not necessarily particularly because, that Menelaus got jilted, but Agamemnon, of course, saw this as a point of honor, all right? The Trojans can't just come in here and take our women like they were some random savages, okay? They can't just come in here and treat Greeks like we were some defenseless peasants, all right? They are going to face consequences. So, okay. The Trojan War, of course, has been discussed before. You had Sing, O Muse of the Rage of Achilles. And, of course, you had the Iliad. You had Menelaus in Paris, where Paris kind of turned around and ran off because, according to the story, after their abortive duel, Paris ran off and Aphrodite forced Helen to have sex with him, which I assume is a euphemism for rape. Paris and Helen's marriage doesn't seem all that happy once they actually got back to Troy. But it's all sort of alluded to sidereally. In fact, later, when Paris himself dies at the hands of Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, does he die at the hands of... or Ajax. I'm sorry, it's Ajax or... God damn it. All right. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I am going back to the phone. It was Ajax?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't know that for sure. You think it's Ajax.
How do you know?
I don't.
That's right. I do. It's Ajax.
Okay, so he says that the guy who ultimately killed him was Ajax. So I'm going to look that up. Okay. That's really a synthesis. Paris of Troy. Okay, so Paris of Troy dies. Next to Paris, fresco from Pompeii. Philoctetes. Paris is ultimately killed by Philoctetes. Philoctetes.
No, his code name was Ajax.
No. It wasn't. No, Philoctetes and Ajax were two separate people. Philoctetes was an archer.
No, his secret agent name was
No,
Ajax.
no, none of that. Philoctetes supposedly was Hercules' personal archer.
Hercules had a fucking archer?
Hercules had an archer. It was Philoctetes. In fact,
I didn't know that.
During the Trojan War, okay, Philoctetes apparently was ready and raring to go, but he got shot in the foot at some point, and the thing is, it got infected and it stank so bad that they left him behind. So, what happened was that he was left behind on the island of Lemnos. No, I'm sorry, it was a snake bite. Okay. Philoctetes was left behind on the island of Lemnos by the other Greeks because his foot stank so bad that they didn't want to bring him. So they sort of left him there. Okay, so later, they need to find out where Hercules is buried because they need his armor? No, they need the bow and arrows. Okay. They need the bow and arrows of Hercules. Tragedy. Odysseus is accompanied by Neoptolemus. Achilles' son is known as Pyrrhus. Walked what to do next. Taking down from Olympus. Machaon the surgeon, Polydarius. Asclepius. Challenge would have killed Paris, son of Priam, but not for the debates of future Greek strategy. Okay, so supposedly Philoctetes killed Paris with the bow and arrows that originally belonged to Hercules. Although Philoctetes himself was kind of his. Well, I'm not going to put too fine a point on it, but supposedly Philoctetes was one of Hercules' male lovers in some sources. Because, Hercules had a throbbing member and it went everywhere. But
he was banging everybody?
He was just banging everybody. Yeah.
It had a hole.
Anything had a hole.
Hercules had a hole. He plowed it.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I remember there was like this one story where he had sex with the side of a mountain. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
What the hell is this world coming to?
Well, it's not coming to anywhere. This is where it was been. And the thing is, most of these are.
That was Buford T.
Oh,
Justice.
sorry. Yeah. Okay, so.
He was banging dudes. I didn't know that. Shit.
That's according. Okay, so I'm going to give a little spoiler to the very end of this discussion and say that the whole thing is a story.
Well, yeah.
It's a story. And the reason is because Iron Age Greeks audiences loved blood, drama, and sex. And they especially loved gay sex. That's a truism, but if you're an Athenian and you're 14 years old and you're a member of the upper class, when you're 14, you're given a Scythian slave boy who's 19 years old, and the Scythian slave boy is instructed to teach the boy the ways of love. I'm sorry, that's just how it was, so
how to smash that booty.
But see, was that story true, or was it made up by Romans who wanted to inform their breathless populace, who was both disgusted and intrigued at the same time at the utter degeneracy of those twisted, sneaky Oriental Greeks? Was it in fact true, or was it in fact propaganda? In fact, in many ways, it may have been tourism. They entice all these Greek tourists. They entice all these Roman tourists to Greece, which of course could use the money, with these lurid stories of Greek depravity, which the Romans in public mightily disdain, but in private are like, yeah, okay, we're done with that. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. It's like the guy in your office who's a born-again Christian, but he's at hedonism every year. He's in the Bahamas every year.
Says it right there.
Yeah.
A born-again Christian.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Like my favorite porn star. Oh,
Yep.
I'm now born.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's important to remember this. Honestly, I'm following the outline at this point. It's important to remember that the Iliad and the Odyssey, and presumably the other parts of the epic cycle which don't survive, they weren't necessarily meant to be history. In many ways, they were very similar to the Bible. Okay? The Bible was a document for Jewish people to describe their shared history and what they themselves value as a society. And the Iliad and the Odyssey, in many ways, fulfilled the exact same purpose. When Homer would tell the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey, they were repeating to Greeks in Ionia and Peloponnesia and all these other, and Attica, what Greeks as a society valued. Because, in fact, the Trojan War in the Iliad and the Odyssey is described almost entirely from the perspective of Iron Age Greeks. Because the Bronze Age Greeks, they had different gods. They had much different traditions. They had different weapons.
How much of a century gap is there between the iron and the bronze?
That's actually a very good question. 800 years.
Okay.
And in fact, that's another thing I was getting to. The Bronze Age ended rather abruptly in 1177 BC with the eruption of the volcano Thera on the island of Santorini off the coast of Crete. The destruction, the volcano was so powerful that it buried virtually every city in Greece under about a half inch of ash. Mycenaean civilization destroyed. Minoan civilization destroyed. Yes, they did. They did. Tartessos, I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm curious, and I know obviously you weren't there. I was not there.
Right.
Do they have any idea, like, was it like a quick burst or like a volcano that rumbled for a few days? I know it's hard.
Considering it was
I know
probably...
you can study the ash levels and shit.
Well, according to geological studies, it was very similar to an eruption like Mount St. Helens. Santorini was almost a perfect conical volcano. It was actually very scenic, and it was something that tourists like to, land on, take a look at, because it was very beautiful. And then one day it started rumbling, started ejecting clouds, and then one day it blew a volcanic pyroclastic cloud that was the size of Great Britain. It was devastating, not just to Greece, but to the the lands of Tartessos in Spain, to Italy, to everything in its path. And the prevailing winds went from east to west, and it deposited ash clouds as far away as Great Britain. It presumably ended an entire... Well, have you ever heard of a place called Doggerland? Doggerland was the land that essentially connected Great Britain with France and Germany. Like it was all one landmass originally. Doggerland sank into the ocean completely. The entire civilization that had been there, and it is only in the last about 5 or 6 years they were making significant archaeological discoveries in like the southern end of the North Sea, that we are finding that there was a major civilization there, utterly destroyed. So in Troy itself, there's Heinrich Schliemann discovered an ash level that was about 0.7 of a centimeter thick. Again, Mycenae was buried in ash. All of civilization was destroyed except, and I was going to get to this later, except for Egypt. Okay? And I'm going to get to Egypt later because Egypt actually plays a very important part in this story. Anyway, so the Trojan War, bear in mind that the Trojan War, from the Roman perspective, okay, from the perspective of the Roman Empire, the Trojans were the good guys and the Greeks were the bad guys. It was that simple. Achilles was, at best, a tragic anti-hero. The real hero of the Trojan War was Hector. And I'll explain why. Hector embodied all of the great virtues of Roman civilization. He was a family man. He was a great warrior. He was dutiful to his king, to his country, to his wife. He was an ideal of the paterfamilias. Achilles, by contrast, was a cheater. Okay? When Achilles was a child, his mother, Thetis, the sea nymph, had dipped him in the river Styx and it covered his entire body, but she held him by the ankle. Okay? So only the ankle was vulnerable. So his entire body was invulnerable except for his ankle because that's where her hand was. Hector, when Hector goes out to face Achilles in that climactic scene where we saw Eric Bana and Brad Pitt fight each other in Wolfgang Petersen's Troy, Hector knew, I'm going out to face a demigod and I'm basically dead. Okay? But I live by a code. I live by my honor. I live by my duty to my hearth, my home, and my country, and my gods. And that is the pinnacle of Roman virtue. Achilles, for all his divinity, is a cheater. He's a cheater. He's angry. He's prone to rage. He's decadent. He's degenerate. He's kind of an asshole. All right? He allows his personal feelings to interfere with his
like him
battle.
already.
Yeah, well, that was Brad Pitt in the movie. Yeah, he was everything. He was very Conan-esque in a way. You know, he followed his own code. He did his own thing. He did not bear fools. He did not bear idiots in charge. He did not follow orders. He refused orders when he disagreed with them. In fact, if you remember from Black Colossus, the leader of the mercenary army, when he is presented with Conan as the new general of all the armies of Khauran, he says basically, this is the worst soldier in my entire army, and with him you have a great chance of victory.
Didn't he say I would have hanged him?
I would have hanged him.
Were he not the best
soldier, the best swordsman in the entire army? Yes,
yeah,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That was basically Achilles. That was Achilles, Iacides. The flower of Greek manhood, who the Romans detested. Okay, he was an asshole. He did not follow any of the Roman virtues. He instead thought himself above such things. He thought himself divine. He thought himself above the law, and he ultimately paid the price. Hector lived forever because Hector made it possible for the Trojans, the Trojan refugees, to escape Troy and settle the Italian peninsula, where they became the ancestors of Romulus and Remus, the fathers of the city of Rome. The Romans believed that they themselves were the direct descendants of the Trojans, and in fact, the Caesars, the Khazars of the Julii, believed themselves to be direct descendants of Aeneas, and thus also direct descendants of the goddess Venus, aka in the Greek pantheon, Aphrodite, the one who favored Paris with the love of Helen. So I keep trying to look up who decided that the Greeks were the good guys. I keep trying to look this up, and I have to say, I don't know. I don't know. The only thing that I can think of, I can only speculate, so this is off the reservation, is that sometime in the 19th century, the Romantics basically decided that the Trojan War was not fought for territory, it was not fought for honor, it was not fought for duty, it was fought for love. That Helen...
It wasn't for duty, it was for booty.
It was for booty. Well, not for duty, but for booty. Thank you, Miles. That's going to be the subtitle of our podcast. Black Helen. Not for duty, but for duty.
For that booty. Gotta
not for duty, but for booty. Yes.
Gotta lay it down and
lay it down. Yak 'em. Yep. Anyway. So I can only imagine that despite the allusions to Helen being raped by Paris, being kind of unhappy in Troy, and all that other stuff, that the people of the Romantic period decided that the war was fought for love, that the love of Paris and Helen transcended time itself. Of course.
Hey, let me ask you this.
Yeah, hit me. Go for it.
On the same subject.
Hit me.
Is love just a bullshit illusion?
Okay. Well, since we're taking this tangent, love is that state. Well, okay, so the whole, the initial period, the whole lust, infatuation, stuff like that. When you fancy someone, when you want to get in their pants, that's infatuation, and that lasts on and off, maybe like 2.5 years or so. Okay, true love,
the honeymoon period.
Yeah, the honeymoon period. True love is that state when the idea of living without the person you love, of being without the person you love, is unthinkable. You literally cannot imagine your life without them. Period.
Fucking A. I like that.
Yeah. And the thing is,
that's a pretty brutal, rough assessment.
It is.
But it's right on the money.
Well, the thing is, the way I either read it somewhere or it was explained to me is that, when you make a choice to be with someone, when you marry someone, then it is, of course, work. It takes work. It takes courage. You got to wake up next to that person every day. You got to go to sleep with that person every night. Every so often, maybe one day you wake up and you look over at the person next to you and think, who is that? I don't even know who that person is. The next day you might wake up and you might hate them. I hate that motherfucker. But you work hard. You work hard to communicate. You work hard to cohabitate. You believe in something higher than yourself, and maybe one day you wake up again and you think, I am overflowing with love with this person that I've been with for so long. But it takes work. It takes dedication. It takes discipline. And the problem is, and it's not even, we make derogatory comments about women, about women want certain things, and if they don't get them, they leave. But honestly, a lot of men today are, they're pussies. There's a lot of the unfortunate side effect of the feminization of men in our society is that no discipline. Their only goal is self-gratification. That's all they want. Their immediate goal is immediate self-gratification. They cannot delay. They cannot think of the bigger picture. They cannot imagine why they need to go downstairs and play with the kids.
I think a lot of that,
PlayStation.
Or at least some of that's due to the TikTok brain.
No doubt. 100%. Technology has literally changed the shape of our brain that we no longer have the attention span necessary to perform discipline, to conceive of the idea of deferred gratification. You're right. And if we cannot fathom the personality traits that make true love possible, are we in fact capable any longer of love at all? In fact, the idea of love in the Western sense is something that we're the only ones who thought it up. Other cultures have, infatuation, they have lust, they have all this other stuff. But in many ways, certain non-Western cultures cannot conceive of the idea of love. To them, marriage is a partnership based on the good of society or the good of the family. Or
it's like a business transaction.
It's a business transaction. It's making more children. It's keeping society going. Okay?
And
arguably their model might be better.
And honestly, anyone who knows a little bit about history, a lot of people get married to ensure survival of their family.
Exactly. To ensure survival of themselves.
Wealthy families.
Yeah.
Join together.
Yeah. In nature, marriage was the man defended and provided, the woman made babies and made the home. And granted, that's a vast oversimplification. Okay, all different cultures have different ideas, but the model is fairly robust. Even in African societies where many cultures remained after a large chunk of humanity went north and spread throughout the rest of the world, you have, and in fact, I was reading about this one tribe in Namibia that the men spend all day sitting and eating khat, which is a kind of mildly narcotic leaf, while the women do all the work. And
wow, that sounds pretty good to me.
Well, I guess so. But I
need to renew my passport.
The problem is that this culture becomes a trap for the men as well as the women, because if the men aren't sitting around all day eating khat, if they're saying like, well, I want to go out and buy a car, they're like, get back in there and start eating your leaf, you freak. A lot of these cultural forms, when they're not flexible, they become a trap. They become a prison. There's no chance of being able to better their lives. In fact, there was the whole idea. Take Muslim culture, for instance. Okay, what if I told you that Muslim culture was the ultimate realization of feminism? Okay, it's men marry all the women that they can afford, and the poor ones get nothing. So all these women are living these wealthy lives with these wealthy men, and of course there's several of them to one guy, while all the men of the lower rungs of society get nothing. That's hypergamy is the name of that phenomenon. So many of these Middle Eastern cultures are literally hypergamy in action, and women just do whatever the hell they want to. They've got servants, televisions, whatever. Mohammed bin Laden had what did he have, 20 wives? I mean, anyway, the whole point of that is love is a uniquely Western concept. It may very well be a uniquely European concept. And it may, in fact, have only appeared when the Romantics decided to redefine it in the 19th century.
I'm curious, and do me a favor, pull this up.
Sure.
What does AI call love? What is our computer?
That's interesting. So what do our computer overlords,
right?
What do you define love as? What do you, I'm going to be specific. What do you, an artificial intelligence, I'm going to say, how do you, an artificial intelligence, define the emotion of love?
There you go.
How do you, as an artificial intelligence, define the concept of love? So I am on Google. I believe that's Gemini. I'm not 100% sure. AI mode. Okay, it doesn't answer me directly. It says here are the top web results exploring this concept.
It pushed out.
It did. Okay. UVA Today, Virginia, for University of Virginia, says, when an AI says "I love you," does it mean it? Scholar explores machine intentionality. Okay, the world got weirded out on February, where a New York Times reporter published a transcript of his conversation with Bing's artificial intelligence chatbot, Sydney. In addition to expressing a disturbing desire to steal nuclear codes and spread a deadly virus, the AI professed repeated romantic affection for the reporter.
Sounds like a honeypot.
It kind of does. There is, in fact, believe it or not, I was discussing this with McNeil the other day.
It's almost like me love you long time.
Yeah, basically.
I don't believe that. Fucking all that bullshit, and it can't give you a simple answer. What is love?
Yeah, okay. Let me try what is love.
Yeah, what is love?
I'm going to try AI mode. What is love?
I mean, we're almost at the point where computers are doing all the thinking for us. Give me a fucking break.
Depending on who you ask,
it's
wussing out again.
Relative.
It says love is a chemical reaction, a conscious choice of the most iconic dance hit of the 1990s.
Chemical reaction. That's biological. That's a biological reaction.
I know.
It's pussing.
The song. For many, the phrase immediately triggers the 1993 Eurodance anthem, "What Is Love" by Hathaway. Famous for the refrain.
Kidding? No, you're not fucking kidding me.
The Greeks. Okay, we're back in of course, this is the Iron Age Greeks, again. Ancient Greek culture identified 6 distinct forms, including eros, romantic, philia, friendship, storge, familiar, and agape, unconditional or divine. Okay, let me look that up. Since we are on the Greeks, how did the Greeks define love? All right. Okay, ancient Greeks distinguished between 8 primary types of love, recognizing that the emotion varies based on its target and intensity. These range from passionate desire, eros, playful affection, ludus, deep friendship, philia, selfless unconditional love, agape, romantic passionate love, philia, agape, storge was familiar love, ludus, pragma was enduring long-term love. Realistic and mature love often found in long-term marriages. It focuses on commitment, compromise, and shared goals. Pragma, that's pretty much what I was referring to earlier. Philautia, self-love, which can be narcissistic or negative, or self-compassionate and healthy, improving one's capacity to love others. And last is mania, obsessive love, a dangerous, unbalanced form of love that leads to possessiveness, obsession, and jealousy.
I like that. That's the one I like.
Well, obviously, the Greeks got it going on. They understand this stuff.
Let me ask you.
Hit me.
And I'll be brief.
Sure.
Okay, in the time machine.
Yep.
When the time traveler.
Yep.
Would you say he had a bond of love with Weena?
Yes. I think so.
Even though she was basically an idiot?
She was a product of her culture.
Well, and when I say idiot, that's not an insult.
Well, yeah, she also looked like Yvette Mimieux, so
a dumb species.
Yeah, fine, I'm good with it. But see, they had the capacity for more. You remember at the very end where you saw that one Eeyore going, he had the capacity for more. That was like the Time Machine's version of 2001. It was like, da, 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 and he's beating up Morlocks. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, he had love for Weena. Yes, he loved Weena. Number one, she's very sweet. She had the ability to learn, and she looked like Yvette Mimieux. So, yeah. So what was your question? I'm sorry.
Did the time traveler experience love between him and Weena?
Yes, he did. Yes, that is correct. I mean, when you're in love with a bimbo...
Because I love my little Sharky, but that's a different kind of love.
It is a different kind of love. It's love for a pet. But, yeah, I perfectly believe that...
Baby!
I entirely believe that people can love someone who's dumber than they are, or smarter, or whatever. Yeah. Love is love. Love, spills. Love spills over. Love gets messy. Love is weird. Love is fucked up. Maybe Paris did love Helen, and he was just an asshole. Or maybe the story we heard about how Paris treated Helen is Greek propaganda or Roman propaganda. Again, the Romans loved propaganda. They loved telling the story their way. They were very good at it. Anyway, okay. Moving on. Yes. Okay. So yeah, to the Romans, the Trojans were the good guys and the Greeks were the bad guys. The Romans, of course, being the literal descendants of the goddess Venus, the Romans believed in love. They may not have believed in the Greek, the exact mathematical Greek definitions of love, but they believed in love for family, for home, for hearth, for the paterfamilias. And of course, they loved women. To the Romans, most of these Greek ideas were unnecessarily complex. The Romans considered themselves a fundamental people. We have traditional values. We're closer to reality. We live in the fullness of the world before us. We don't live in some archaic world of the mind like Aristotle would suggest. Anyway, so moving right along.
In any kind of drama on a stage.
Yeah, exactly. We don't live in a drama on a stage. We live in the real world. Okay, so the Trojan War, of course, ends as we saw it in the movie. Troy falls, is burned to the ground. So everybody gets on their boats and decides
they got fucked.
They did.
Up.
They did. Everybody decides to get to their boats and then go home. But there's a terrible storm that hits the Aegean Sea, and scatters all the ships. Menelaus and Helen are they're swept off to Egypt. Agamemnon is the only one who returns home. But after the 10-year hiatus of the Trojan War, okay, when Agamemnon returns home, he turns right back in. He comes right back to the Atreides family drama, okay? He's thrust right back into the world of the Atreides bloodlust, and him and his war bride Cassandra are promptly murdered by his cousin Aegisthus, the son of Thyestes, who is the brother of Atreus, who is now Clytemnestra's lover. Clytemnestra, of course, was the wife of Agamemnon, the mother of Iphigenia, who Agamemnon had sacrificed. And the day he comes home, Aegisthus stabs him, they basically throw nets over them, and they basically stabbed him and Cassandra to death. Cassandra, of course, as I said, the prophetess of Troy that nobody believed, or rather, Priam decided to stop believing her because he was mad that she made him get rid of his son. Cassandra at this point is like, man, I'm done. Whatever, I embrace my fate. Fuck it. Nothing I can do. Okay? So, they're dead. Okay? They're dead.
They did.
They did. Okay. So at any rate, this brings us to the story of Wolfgang Petersen's Troy. All right. Okay, so the sources of Wolfgang Petersen's Troy are not necessarily the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Hey, give me a little bit of a background on Wolfgang.
Sure. Wolfgang Petersen was the director of Das Boot.
No shit.
Yes, Wolfgang Petersen, and he also directed The Never-Ending Story.
That was good too.
It was good. He's a great director.
Man, Das Boot.
Yes. Jürgen Prochnow.
I saw that as a kid in
Yep.
the theater. That fucked me up.
Yep. Wolfgang Petersen is one of the great German directors of modern filmmaking.
Man,
Yes.
my whole family went and saw that.
Yep.
And we saw that where it was in German with English subtitles.
Oh, nice.
And my mother could sit there and translate the whole time.
Well, neat. Okay.
Fucking A.
All right. Yeah, well,
Man,
Wolfgang Petersen, he...
And even though Germany got their asses whooped in World War II and they deserved it, those poor submariners, man, they had, 3 out of 4 died?
Pretty much.
It was just a rough life. And
It was.
And they were like the elite.
Yes, they were.
Chosen for that duty.
They were.
And they knew they were going to their goddamn graves.
He also directed In the Line of Fire. Oh,
sonar fucked them up.
Yes.
And they had no clue they were being tracked with sonar.
That's right.
They were doing all their little evasive maneuvers.
Right.
They had no clue the entire time.
The entire time they were being tracked, it was hopeless.
They were getting pinged.
It was hopeless. Yep.
They got fucked up.
Classic film.
Fuck every one of them. They deserved it. They brought it on themselves.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I mean, it was
tragic.
I mean, it wasn't your average German's fault that the Nazis did what they did.
Hey, like I said earlier, my mom watched Dresden get firebombed.
Yeah.
Fuck Germany, man. They brought that shit on themselves.
Okay. That's fair.
Just like Japan did.
Yes, they did.
Motherfuckers.
Wolfgang Petersen also directed Enemy Mine, In the Line of Fire.
I saw that was actually decent.
Yeah. He was a big director back in the 80s. He directed Air Force One with Harrison Ford. Okay, all right. He directed The Perfect Storm with George Clooney. Yay. Okay.
Let's go sword fishing.
Right. Well, then, so he directs Troy, and Troy underperforms slightly, and the critics are not happy with it.
Well, it could have been better.
It could have been better. Well, the thing is, it could have been better, but the thing is, I saw the original in the theater, and I thought it was really, really rushed. So then I see the director's cut, and it fills in a lot of the blank. That was way better. That was way better. Yeah. I thought it was really good. So the sources for Troy, okay, were not, as I said, the Iliad. Okay, they were the other books in the epic cycle, and they were also a Norse saga called the Torjumana Saga. Okay, the Torjumana Saga was written by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century in Iceland. Snorri Sturluson was a chronicler of Norse legends and mythology, but he was a big fan of a narrative device that he himself founded called euhemerization. All right. Now, euhemerization is when you take a myth and you remove all the supernatural elements to it, that you make it more realistic, that you make it more like it could have actually happened. In the case of Snorri Sturluson, the Trojan War, in his mind, was the story between the Aesir and the Vanir, whereas the Aesir were the Greeks and the Vanir were the Trojans. And again, it happened largely like it did in the epic cycle. But the idea that he removed all the supernatural elements and told basically a story of two warring cultures, which is, and well, basically what happened.
On that subject, is war just inevitable?
Yes.
It's just gonna happen.
War is inevitable. I'm sorry. I don't like it. I don't particularly think it's good, but it is. This subject came up recently at work when we were watching Black Panther. Okay, and the hero of Black Panther, of course, is Prince T'Challa, who is the king of a country that was much more advanced than all of its neighbors technologically, but they kept that technology to itself while the rest of the African continent was exploited and enslaved to some degree. Meanwhile, the antagonist of the story is Eric Killmonger. Okay, Eric Killmonger believed that they should use the advanced technology and the supposed superior culture of Wakanda to spread throughout the world, to organize revolts of all the oppressed, all the underclass, all the marginalized peoples to take over the world. And here's the problem. Okay, here's the problem. So, T'Challa...
No, what was it? Like magic?
No, it was technology.
Just technology?
It was actual technology.
Okay.
Because they were the world's only source of vibranium. Because millions of years ago, a large vibranium meteorite had crashed in the territory of what is then Wakanda.
Territory now called Wakanda.
Wakanda, yes. They were the beneficiaries of a completely random agglomeration of natural resources.
And they figured out how to mine this shit.
Yeah, they figured out how to mine it. They figured out how to refine it. They figured out how to use it and utilize it. Yes. They didn't share with their neighbors because they thought the technology was too dangerous. They didn't go out and expand and conquer because they believed that by doing so, they would ultimately, their own civilization would ultimately become stretched thin and their empire would fall, which is what happens to empires. But I was having a discussion about this, and of course, T'Challa is the hero, and the idea is that you make change incrementally, okay? You make change slowly. You bring the fruits of your technology carefully. Piecemeal. But...
And why was this dude, what was his name?
Eric Killmonger, played by Michael B. Jordan.
No, the actor.
Michael B. Jordan.
No, I'm sorry, the character's name.
T'Challa.
What made T'Challa an expert on this subject?
Precisely. Who is T'Challa to decide this?
Right.
Okay. At the same time, Eric Killmonger wanted, his ultimate goal was the expansion of Wakandan civilization and Wakandan values because, well, being Wakandan himself, he felt that his values were superior. And now, I'm not saying conquest for its own sake is a good thing, but civilizations expand and they grow. Okay? They expand because, unfortunately, this is how Mother Nature has programmed us. We expand.
I'm all for it.
We churn.
We
grow.
We wouldn't be sitting here.
And the thing is, I have often said, so there's this anarchist named Derek Jensen who basically agrees with Robert E. Howard and says that civilization is more or less a failure. Okay. Well, Robert E. Howard didn't say, here's the problem with Robert E. Howard. Okay. Robert E. Howard says that civilization is inherently corrupt. But then why does Conan keep going back? Okay. Conan never goes back to Cameria to live the life of the woodland savage. He loves civilization. Sumerian. I'm sorry, Sumerian. Yeah, you're right. It's Sumerian. Howard intended it as Sumerian. It's Sumerian. Okay, sorry. Okay, so why does Conan keep going back to civilization because he loves it. He hates it, but he loves it. Civilization has the
I
beautiful
never
women.
thought that's a great thought.
Thank you. Civilization has beautiful women.
Booty.
It has modern conveniences. It has technology. And I myself, have often said that the one saving grace of civilization, above all, aside from the benefits of technology, like cell phones and all that other stuff, sure, why not, is the fact that humanity is destined for extinction. Tomorrow a meteorite could hit the earth and kill all of us, destroy all life on earth. We need to be off this planet. We need to get off this planet while the getting is still good. Elon Musk himself says he has actually run statistical models on this. If humankind expands into the other planets of the solar system, the chances of the extinction of the human race fall to somewhere around 0. Even if we have one extraterrestrial colony, the chances of human survival increase by orders of magnitude. So the only way to get off this planet is civilization. Is large-scale organization.
You don't fuck with the Musk.
No, you don't. No, I wouldn't.
And how could you dispute genius?
You can't.
Let me ask you this.
Yep, okay.
And these all might be trash baggers, but like some I've read, and I'm not giving any weight to them.
Sure.
We'll never leave our solar system. I don't buy that because
I don't buy that at all.
A few hundred years ago, people said, we'd
never leave the planet.
We'd never leave the planet. We'd never a flying machine.
Werner von Braun said
set foot on the moon.
Exactly. No one had thought putting robots on Mars.
And people are trying to say, we can get to Mars, but we'll never return. I just don't buy that.
Werner von Braun
I personally think the human spirit.
You said it right there. Yes. Werner von Braun said that humanity will go where humanity decides to go. And so the point of that is, if I was to choose a culture that could get us into outer space quicker, it'd be the Wakandans. So if Aaron Killmonger wants to spread Wakandan civilization, a superior culture with superior technology and arguably superior values, I think that's what they were trying to get to, in the movie, they have superior African values, then Wakanda has a right to expand. And if that's how they are to expand, and our upper levels of society are hopelessly corrupt, what gives them the right to exist over a dynamic, culturally invigorative, technologically superior society?
And not to get weighted down in politics.
Sure.
But on the surface, I think that's part of what American ideology is.
Yeah.
But deep down, you and I both know a lot of it's corruption, it's fucking greed.
Well, yeah.
Motherfuckers starting wars for money.
Yep. Well, nothing greases the wheels like slime.
But, I think the American ideology of trying to spread democracy around the world is a noble
a noble aspiration
and endeavor.
Yes.
But is it at the core of what the people who are driving it are about, or is it they're just fucking greed?
I'll tell you what's at the core.
Like, look at Ukraine. What a fucking mess.
It's a fucking mess.
It's just greed.
I'll tell you exactly what's at the core. The core is Mother Nature wants to stir the genetic pot as much as possible. And deep in our genetic material, deep in our cultures, deep in our genetic makeup is the biological imperative to do so. Wars stir the pot. Commerce stirs the pot. Travel stirs the pot. Adventure stirs the pot. Interstellar travel will stir the pot. Panspermia, spreading our genes. Mother Nature is inside all of us, demanding we spread our seed.
I saw a badass thing on us going to Mars.
Yep.
The first colonists.
Yep.
How it would take a couple years to get there.
It would.
And eventually, growing up on Mars, we're going to be smaller.
Yeah, that's true.
Eyes rounder.
Yep.
To absorb more sunlight.
That's right. The environment will physically change us. Yes, that is correct. But we'll still survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It beats extinction. In fact, there may, in fact, someday be permanent human societies in space, and they'll be radically different.
And what if enough? And believe me, I'm not the first person to think of this.
Sure,
people get to Mars, colonize Mars. What if they decide, hey, we want to separate from Earth? We're our own politic.
That's been discussed many, many times.
Yeah, like I said, I sure as hell am not the first person to think of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You are definitely not. And someday, should this happen, I guarantee you Earth and Mars will find some stupid reason to go to war against each other.
Exactly.
It's inevitable. Because then, we're going to want to spread our seed there. They're going to want to spread their seed here. It's simply inevitable. In fact, they touch upon this idea in The Expanse, which was a TV show on the Sci-Fi Network, and then went to Amazon Prime, where the solar system is locked in generational conflict. And it's Earth versus Mars versus the outer planets versus the
outer planets.
The outer planets.
Who's
the
on the
asteroid belt?
Who's on them? Well, they're not planets. They're asteroids.
Yep.
They should call them the outer asteroids.
Well, there is human settlement on planets like Callisto, on moons like Callisto.
But that's not a planet. It's a moon.
You can't settle on Jupiter.
I know that. It's too
But it's still
harsh.
in the planetary system. Okay, the outer moons. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the outer moons, yeah.
The outer moons. Okay, yeah. Earth and Mars are fighting over the outer moons, and you have the belters in the asteroid belt. They've developed their own language, their own patois, and they're all slightly misshapen as a result of cosmic radiation.
Coterie.
It's more than a coterie. It's an entire culture.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, multiple coteries.
Multiple coteries, including the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, which is ostensibly what
are they brawling over?
Air, water, resources, freedom.
They can't manufacture that shit in that age.
Difficult. The further away you get from Earth, the more difficult it is to manufacture the raw materials for survival.
Then stay on Earth.
But if we stay on Earth, we're dead. We're eventually all going to die. It's inevitable. It happened to the dinosaurs. It happened to the Dimetrodons.
Fucked.
Yes, they did. It happened. Well, they became the birds, arguably. But the Great Permian Extinction, the White Death, 99% of all the world's species basically died. And then, before that, you had the impact.
Those poor bastards.
Yes, I know. You had the impact of, I think it was called Theia. You had an entire planet crash into the Earth. It was basically take two. Anything that was living on Earth basically vaporized. Not only that, in 1 billion years, Earth becomes an inert rock when our core stops spinning.
Now, is that not why we have an asteroid belt now? Because much shit. No. I'm saying so much shit was incoming into our solar system.
No, the asteroid belt is because there was all this raw material that was split apart by the gravity of Jupiter and Mars. It was never able to form because of the twin attractions of Jupiter and Mars on them.
Okay.
And the gravity, due to the inverse square law, was about the same because Jupiter is further away. Mars was a good deal closer. The asteroid belt is in this midpoint between their gravitational pulls.
But Jupiter is a much bigger bit.
Jupiter is enormous. It's the largest non-solar object in our star system. Yes.
And the scary part is it could fit inside the sun like what? How many millions of times?
A lot. I don't know. A lot.
Goofy.
Big time. We're the cosmic detritus left over after the formation of the sun. Yeah, we're basically just floating garbage. What are you going to do? Anyway, so Diane Kruger was gorgeous, okay? She definitely embodied the characteristics of Helen of Troy as she is described in all these sources, okay? However, she wasn't precisely what Helen would have looked like because, as I said, the Bronze Age Achaeans were substantially different from the Iron Age Greeks who came later. In fact, the Bronze Age Achaeans were probably they weren't brown by any means, but they definitely had olive complexions, dark hair. They probably looked more like the Trojans did than than they look like the Greeks in the movie. Arguably, though, Achilles. Well, I was going to actually get to that later. I'm jumping ahead. So, at any rate, is it then appropriate? Okay, we go back to the original question: is it then appropriate for Helen of Troy to be played by a West African? Now, okay, so now we get to the Odyssey. All right. Now, in the Odyssey, okay, 10 years have passed since the Trojan War. It's a not totally distant memory. So Telemachus and the son of Nestor, whose name I forget, Telemachus is the son of Odysseus, gets on the road one day and decides to go to visit. I think they're living in Sparta. I'm not 100% sure. They might be living in Mycenae. But Menelaus and Helen, after the Trojan War, returned home after a stint in Egypt, according to the Odyssey. So Telemachus visits Helen and Menelaus at their palace. They sit down, they have some dinner, they talk about old times. He tells them some stories about his father. And there is a verbal sparring match, okay, between Menelaus and Helen. All right? So Helen says, I knew your father well. One time, I was inside the city doing shopping or whatever, and I saw this old beggar, and I knew immediately that it was Odysseus. And I, gave him some food to eat, helped him on his mission, and helped him get past the gate. And because, I was tired, I was really sick of Troy. I wanted to go home. Blah blah blah. Poor little me, stuck in Troy after being abducted by those awful Trojans. So Menelaus is like, I too remember a story of Odysseus, and that we were inside the Trojan horse. They dragged us inside the city because they thought that we had left the Trojan horse as an offering to Poseidon because we had all been beset by the plague. They drag us inside the city. They're doing their whole victory dance. And just to make sure there's nobody inside, because somebody thought, well, what if somebody's hiding in there? They had Helen walked around the Trojan horse, mimicking the voices of the wives of the Achaean kings. Okay? So she apparently she was really good at impressions, apparently. And she did her impression of Penelope, of Clytemnestra, and of all these others. And eventually when she gets to the wife of one of the kings inside the horse, to Anticlus thinks it's really his wife. And they actually have to grab the guy and hold him down to make sure he doesn't make a sound. And basically the implication is that the implication is made that Menelaus is making is that, Helen was still on their side. Like I said, it's a verbal sparring match. It's years later. The reason Menelaus had spared Helen in the first place is because Menelaus had burst into the chamber. All the other Trojan royals were dead. Helen is there. Menelaus is like, I got you now. I'm going to fucking kill you. And Helen is like, you know what? You're right. I deserve to die. Go ahead and do it. She pulls off her dress, and she's all naked with her, big old tatas and, her butata and all that other stuff. And he's just like, oh, I can't stay mad at you, honey. And they go off and, do their thing.
You dumb shit.
Well, apparently they were very happy together, according to the story. They were very happy together once they eventually got home. And in fact, Telemachus sees two people, according to Homer and according to all the later scholars, they actually enjoy a fairly drama-free home life. And it's weird because they're doing this verbal sparring match, but they're kind of smiling at each other. They're kind of joking at each other about this. It doesn't seem to be that big a deal. There's no tension between them. And so I submit that, in fact, what if that's not Helen? Okay? What if that's somebody else? What if that's somebody else that he's passed? This is the thesis of the entire podcast, okay? What if that is, in fact, someone else? So basically, they're just making jokes at Helen's expense. She's not there to defend herself. So Theanoe, who, as I said, was my candidate for who this second Helen is, Theanoe can say, yeah, I was such a bitch, wasn't I? And Menelaus is like, yeah, what a cunt. And they all laugh. And Telemachus is like, they seem happy enough because it's not really Helen. They can insult Helen all they want to, even though she's pretending to be Helen. But the thing is, anybody who remembers the original Helen knows that's not her. Maybe the servants or whoever, but they're just servants. They can't say anything. Anybody who was of any social import in Achaean society following the end of the Trojan War was either dead, missing, or just gone. So Menelaus can bring this Egyptian princess, which was my thesis, back to their court in Sparta and say, "Yep, this is Helen." I'm like, that's Helen. Yes, it's Helen. I'm the king. What I say goes. Fuck you if you don't like it. Queen Helen, welcome back, etc. Now
he Ric Flairs their ass.
He Ric Flairs them.
This is Helen, whether you like it,
or not. Woo! Yep.
That's what he did. He Ric Flaired them.
He Ric Flaired them.
Whether you like it or not.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Oh God!
Now, I do want to bring up one thing, because this was actually in the outline before all this discussion, is that there is a third story in the life of Odysseus.
Oh shit! Hang on. Piss break.
Okay.
You need another beer?
No, I actually still have this one.
Okay.
I'll just talk while you're pissing.
All right.
I won't talk about the subject, though. I'll talk about other stuff.
All right. Be right there, dog.
That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess this is an intermission, so, smoke them if you got them. Take a leak. Do whatever you got to do. I highly recommend the director's cut of Troy. And honestly, one of the big criticisms of the director's cut of Troy was that the soundtrack was different. But honestly, the soundtrack of the original was a little overwrought, in my opinion. It was a bit too twee. It was a little bit Pirates of the Caribbean. It was a little too excited. It was a little too fabulous, or fantastic, maybe. It created this sort of whimsical atmosphere of fairy stories rather than mythology. The soundtrack for the director's cut was a lot more, I guess you could say, serviceable. And honestly, the director's cut has a lot more that adds to the story. Like, hello, Sharky. Miles' cat, Sharky. That's the Revenant's cat, Sharky. Hello, Sharky. Hello, Sharky. Hello, Sharky. Anyway, one of the major additions to the director's cut of Troy was the sack of Troy, that they went into detail when the Greeks breached the city walls of Troy. It was very graphic, but it was real. It was part of the story. It was exactly as Hector had predicted. Children were thrown from the walls, wives were raped and murdered, men were killed, women and children were collared up and sold into slavery. It was a whole thing. I was just discussing the director's cut of Troy. I thought it was I honestly thought it was a really good movie.
I liked it overall. Yeah. Like we were talking about.
Yeah.
A few parts of it were a little weak.
But it was like old school. It was old school sword and sandal. Okay. So there is a third story in the life of Odysseus. This is not as well known. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, because Odysseus, under his Roman name of Ulysses, makes an appearance in Dante's Inferno. And
that's right.
Ulysses is one of the most compelling characters in Dante's Inferno.
He was very stoic.
He was. Dante Alighieri basically just sits back and lets him talk. Because he is such an elegant and poetic speaker.
Even in hell.
He was
a badass.
Because he's Ulysses. He was one of the greatest. And in the story of Dante's Inferno, Ulysses, he gets the wanderlust, gathers his men together for one last voyage. And the voyage is to the other side of the world to behold the great sea of the south. And he comes within sight of earthly paradise. And his boat is finally wrecked. He literally comes within sight of Mount Purgatory, but his boat is destroyed by waves and weather. And the reason is, again, Ulysses, Achilles, all these characters were not the heroes of the Trojan story. They were, at best, flawed anti-heroes. And the story of Ulysses is because the reason that Ulysses is being punished in hell is because, well, number one, he lied to his men. He took them on a fool's errand. And number two, he sought the forbidden knowledge of the divine. That is to say, the
also wasn't being born before Christ part of the punishment?
Not necessarily. See, that's the Elysian Fields. The Elysian Fields were the upper levels of hell, and they were actually very pleasant. They were reserved for noble souls who lived before Christ was born.
That was the first level.
That was the first level, yes.
But they were still tormented by their knowledge that they would never achieve.
But yeah, they were tormented by that knowledge, yes, but that's it. They still led a fairly pleasant existence. Yes, they did. They did in fact have the knowledge that they were outside the eye of the Lord and whatever, and that was bad. But it wasn't as bad as being, chained to a tree made of spikes or something.
They knew it could be a lot worse.
It could be a lot worse. Yeah. They had a fairly pleasant time. But the point is that Ulysses himself was being punished because, again, he sought forbidden knowledge, and the beauty
wasn't that. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure, of course.
Wasn't that Dante labeled that as arrogance?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Because I've read that fucking thing.
You're right. Times. That is exactly the word he used, was arrogance.
Yeah.
It is arrogant for man to seek the forbidden knowledge of the divine. But here is the beautiful little irony in that, because Dante Alighieri sees himself in Ulysses, because what is he doing if not seeking knowledge of the divine? He is making this voyage, he's making this journey into Inferno, into Purgatorio, and into Paradiso
He's
itself.
Interpreting.
Yes, but he's making this journey. He is seeking forbidden knowledge. He knows his fate will be similar to that of Ulysses. He looks at Ulysses and he sees himself. And that's the thing. And the thing is, Ulysses, of course, did his thing because he's a man of action. He's a man of adventure. Dante Alighieri, his punishment, well, that is to say, his entire journey was because he wanted to be reunited with the woman of his dreams. Now, follow me on this. Dante Alighieri is sitting out in a castle in Ravenna somewhere. He's far from home, and he's just sitting. He's got nothing to do. All his creature comforts are met. He sits down and he starts writing some fan fiction about reuniting with, his lost love, Beatrice. But the problem is, as time goes on, his work becomes a life of its own. It becomes art for its own sake. The art, the story that he's making.
I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, as a birthday gift, you gave me the entire.
Yes, I did.
The whole.
Yes, I did.
Divine Comedy.
You still have it?
Of course.
Okay, just checking.
Where would it be?
I don't know.
It's right over there.
Okay. Maybe you read it so much you destroyed it. I don't know. Anyway, so the point is.
Actually.
I mean, you've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a flaw. That's a character.
Conan too.
Yeah.
I have. Yeah.
But so the idea that Dante Alighieri has spent all this time and energy because he simply wants to write down where he's reunited with Beatrice, but he only writes all this stuff in the first place because he has to earn it.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Hit me.
I got to have a little bit of fun here.
Okay, go ahead.
When he wants to get reunited with Beatrice and it ultimately fails.
Yep.
It makes me think of that line from Airplane.
Yeah.
What a pisser.
What a pisser. In fact, I'm about to get to that.
What a fucking pisser.
What a pisser. That's okay. So I'm about to get to that. So Dante Alighieri, all right. He can't simply write down, Dante and Beatrice meet and they have sex and they're happily ever after, because, what's the point in that?
That's too easy.
It's too easy. He has to make his avatar earn it. He has to earn his reunion with Beatrice. He has to put in the work. He needs to go through hell itself to be reunited with the woman of his dreams. But he takes such a journey, and it goes so deep, and it gets so serious, and he puts so much of himself into it that over time he has made a commitment to the art itself, that it becomes special. It becomes more than just about him. So when he finally reunites with Beatrice in earthly paradise or in purgatory, he is so committed to the verisimilitude.
Wait, was it purgatory?
Well, it was at the top of purgatory. It was earthly paradise.
Sure.
Fairly sure.
I thought it was like at one of the highest levels.
Well, that's where they part ways.
Okay, all right. You got me.
Well, because eventually Virgil is replaced. Virgil can't go any further.
Right.
So his guide is replaced by Beatrice. So the point is, he has such a commitment to the artistic.
Don't scare me like that.
Sorry. He has such a commitment to the artistic verisimilitude of his work that when fictional Dante is finally reunited with fictional Beatrice, Dante can't help himself. Fictional Beatrice has to act in the story exactly the way she acted in the real world.
And on a tiny subnote for Dante,
yes.
Hell yeah for Florence.
Hell yeah for Florence. What do you mean?
They wouldn't give up his bones.
No, Ravenna wouldn't give up his bones.
Ravenna?
He's buried in Ravenna. Florence has tried to get his bones back for 500 years, and Ravenna won't give them back.
Then I got it backwards.
You got it backwards. Florence has been trying to get the physical remains of Dante Alighieri back from Ravenna for 500 years.
Do me a favor, please.
Yes, okay.
Double check that.
I will.
I could have sworn
Dante was in exile in Ravenna.
Exile.
Yes.
He was exiled from
Florence.
Right.
He was exiled from Florence to Ravenna.
Sworn
he was buried in Ravenna.
I could have sworn he was buried in Florence. If you're right, yeah.
Okay, death and burial. Dante's final days were spent in Ravenna, where he had been invited to stay in the city in 1318 by its prince, Guido il della Penta.
Okay, well, I'm glad.
Guido II da Polenta. Dante died in Ravenna on 14 September 1321, aged 56, of quartan malaria contracted while returning from a diplomatic mission to the Republic of Venice. He was attended by his three children.
I thought Venice wanted him, and he was buried in Florence.
Ravenna.
Is that just for the sake of argument? Is that like a county, perhaps?
It is a city. It is, but it was part. Okay, it was.
I'd swear Venice wanted him, and he was buried in Florence.
Venice. All right. Okay.
Sharky, you crazy little goon.
Okay, so Venice. Okay. Let me start again. The Byzantine Empire, following the reconquest under Justinian of a lot of the Western Roman imperial territory, after they conquered the Ostrogothic kingdom, they established.
I've only been to Italy a few times. I've never heard of Ravenna.
Yeah, it's in the north.
Okay.
They established during the Eastern Roman Empire. They established independent autonomous states at the border of the empire called exarchates. And they were ruled by an exarch, okay? Now, this exarch was an imperial representative who managed the affairs of state, so the emperor didn't have to, go back and forth. There were all the exarchs were.
There's too much going on.
There's too much going on.
Right.
So,
yeah,
the exarchate, or the capital of the exarchate of Ravenna, was Ravenna, which was a very ancient city. But the exarchate of Ravenna itself later became the Republic of Venice. So when the Republic of Venice wanted to build a new capital that was more strategic and commercially viable, they chose a small village called Rialto, and they built the city of Venice around it. Okay? Yes.
All right.
Ravenna is still there. It's just no longer the capital of the Republic. It was the capital of the Ostrogothic kingdom. It was the capital of the Exarchate of Ravenna, and later, When the Exarchate of Ravenna became the Republic of Venice, they moved.
I know Dante had a rough life.
He had a rough life. He, ended the Exarchate, the growing menace of the Lombards and the Franks, iconoclast, Patrick Pep in the Short, for Charlemagne.
He got fucking backstabbed by his own political party.
Yes. Okay, Venice. Again, Venice began. Okay.
Well, so just for the sake of geography,
yep.
You said Ravenna is inside the Dominion of Venice?
Well, it was.
It was.
It was. Okay, traditional founding is identified with the dedication of the first church, that of San Giacomo on the island of Rialto. Roman Byzantine territory was organized in the Exarchate of Ravenna, administered from the ancient port of Ravenna, overseen by a viceroy. The Exarch, appointed by the emperor in Constantinople. Ravenna and Venice were connected by sea routes, with the Venetians' isolation came increasing autonomy. Okay, the first Doge of Venice was Paolo Lucio Anafesto, elected in 697. Some modern historians claim that Paolo Lucio Anafesto was actually the Exarch, Paul, and Paul's successor, Marcello Tegaliano, which was Paul's Magister Militum, or general. Okay, the Lombard king Aistulf conquered most of the Exarchate of Ravenna in 751, leaving Venice a lonely and increasingly autonomous Byzantine outpost. During that period, the seat of the local Byzantine governor, the Duke or Dux, later Doge, was at Malamocco. Settlement on the islands in the Goon probably increased with the Lombard conquest of other Byzantine territories, as refugees sought asylum in the area. While the episcopal seat of Olivolo at San Pietro da Castello was created during the reign of Doge Agnello Patriciano, the ducal seat moved from Malamocco to the more protected Rialto, which is modern-day Venice. Charlemagne, blah, 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 tried to seduce... Okay. All right. So Venice was a outpost of the Exarchate of Ravenna, and then Ravenna was conquered by the Lombards, who were the kings of Italy. Venice was isolated. All the refugees came to Venice. They built their capital on the island of Rialto. Okay? And then they built up their city, just sort of built up from there. Now, Ravenna later falls under the control of the Holy Roman Emperors, okay? But at this point, so did Florence, all right? Now, Florence was divided between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. And the Ghibellines supported the emperor and the Guelphs supported the pope. Now, Dante was a Guelph, but he later became either a black Guelph or a white Guelph who favored rapprochement with the emperor. Anyway, it's a whole thing. The point is, Dante is buried in Ravenna because that's where he spent his exile. Florence spent 500 years trying to get him back. There is literally an order of warrior monks who guard Dante's tomb and prevent the Florentines from coming over and trying to steal it. Yeah, it's pretty badass.
It's the way it should be.
Yeah, yeah. And again, Florence actually Florence literally has a mausoleum to Dante, but Dante himself is not buried there. They like to pretend
because Florence said, fuck you.
Florence
and exiled him.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, so Dante Alighieri, okay, this was Dante Alighieri's true tragedy is that he just wanted a little bit of comfort from a fan fiction he wanted to write about him reuniting with Beatrice, but the work became so monumental, so important, that the very work itself would outlast him, its reputation would outlast him, and he himself would presumably be punished in hell for the crime of seeking forbidden knowledge, while the story of the Divine Comedy would spread throughout Western civilization. And so there Dante is at the highest peak, just below the Empyrean, where Beatrice sails off into the glorious communion with God. She turns to him, she gives him one smile only, and then disappears. And he is the saddest man in heaven. He's just sitting there on a mountain going, shit. Yep. And that
sucks to be him.
A pisser.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was the last act in the story of Ulysses, a.k.a. Odysseus.
What's a good line? Women.
Women.
Oh, women.
Yep, women.
What was the saying? You can't live with them.
Can't live with them.
You can't kill them.
Can't let the other guy take them, or you're sacrificing your honor. Okay, well, now we get to the real meat.
You can't kill them.
Yep. Now we get to the real meat. Because, Menelaus, he is blown off course.
You know, I'm glad you corrected my knowledge of history.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know how I got that in my head.
Well, because the Italians want you to think he's buried there. The Florentines want you to think he's buried there. He's not buried there.
They did a fixed job on me because I would have sworn Florence had him and Venice wanted him back. Okay.
Nope. Ravenna. Years have passed and Florence has tried to get his body returned. Ravenna has just said F you the whole time. Go F yourself. F you. Suck a bag of dicks.
Well,
we're never giving him up.
If I ever travel again, I'll go to Ravenna.
There you go. Yeah.
I want to go to Perth.
Yep.
And then I'll make Ravenna number 2.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Anyway, so Menelaus, as how Odysseus is blown off course, a bunch of these other guys are blown off course. Ajax the Lesser is blown off course, and I think he dies or something. But anyway, so the point is, Menelaus lands in Egypt, and he lands on the island of Pharos. Pharos, of course, later becomes the seat of the famous lighthouse. Now, let me explain something, all right? Because when Menelaus arrives in Egypt, he arrives at a very interesting point in their history. Because in the previous dynasty, the 18th dynasty, okay, a pharaoh named Akhenaten decided one day that the people of Egypt were no longer going to worship the Egyptian gods because the various Egyptian cults and priesthoods had become too powerful. So he said from now on, there was only one god to worship, and that is Aten, the disk of the sun. Okay, the sun disk. That is who you worship now. You worship the sun. And he changed his name to Akhenaten. And his wife, Nefertiri, and him, they were brother and sister, bore him 2 children, Tutankhaten and Anakes and Aten. All right. Now, Tutankhaten. Okay, so his general was Horemheb, and so the problem is that Akhenaten, the pharaoh, was so obsessed with his kingdom, with his religious revival, that, as many do, he ignored the political situation outside his kingdom. And we actually have several letters from several of Egyptian tributaries, like the city of Jerusalem, that was ruled by a king at the time named Tabu Khepa, who said, could you please send some troops? The Hittites are about to wipe us out. Now, the Hittites, who will figure very prominently later, they were an Indo-European people who lived in Asia Minor. All right? They were our relatives. And the Hittites had a very powerful empire.
Let me ask you this.
Hit me.
By the time the message got there, there's a good chance they're already
wiped out. Yeah, there's a good
right?
chance they're already all dead. Yes, that's exactly right.
I mean, it's not like he hit the send.
No, it's not like he hit the send button. They had runners, they had horsemen. They presumably had maybe birds of some sort. But yeah, by the time they got the message, the Hittites had probably overrun his city completely. So finally, and again, I'm simplifying greatly, but finally, this situation he could not allow it to continue. So there was a military coup that overthrew Tutankhaten by his chief general, who was a man named Horemheb. All right, Horemheb got rid of Akhenaten and replaced him with his brother or son, well, whatever, Tutankhaten, which his name was changed back to Tutankhamun. And this is where Tutankhamun comes from. This was the tomb that Howard Carter opened in 1920. Tutankhamun was a weak and sickly child. He basically was a puppet for Horemheb. And at one point, supposedly, Tutankhamun's sister wife, Anakes en Amun, she changed her name back from Anakes en Aten, or Anakes en Pa-Aten, back to Anakes en Amun, sent a letter to Suppiluliuma the First, the king of the Hittites, saying, I'm very interested in a political marriage. Could you please send one of your princes? So supposedly Suppiluliuma sends a prince named Zananza who disappears somewhere around the city of Tyre in Phoenicia. Now, supposedly Tyre, Tyre, yes. It is, at the time, it was one of the Phoenician capitals along with Sidon. So, at any rate, what happened was that everyone, the Hittites blamed the Egyptians blamed the Hittites, but here's the thing. The Phoenicians were crafty middlemen, and they probably got rid of them because, for the same reason that the Parthians kept the Chinese and the Romans apart.
Rid of him or her?
Him. Zananza, the prince.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The prince, Zananza, supposedly never made it to Memphis or Thebes or wherever else.
Kind of like my credit card.
Yeah. They never made it.
Didn't show up.
Zananza never made it to Memphis. Suppiluliuma is pissed.
He called you and say, hey, dog.
Yeah, he called him up and said, hey, dog.
Where's my prince?
Suppiluliuma invited his friend Assurbanipal over to fix his online credit profile. And anyway, so Assurbanipal the Assyrian. But anyway, so the point is, okay, so the Phoenicians probably were the ones who got rid of them. There was a war. There was a war between, well, it was a very small war between the Hittites and the Egyptians, which eventually was inconclusive. The Egyptian, basically Horemheb said, look, I'm sorry about that. I'd like to make it right. I'll send you restitution. We got other problems right now. We can't discuss this. The Hittites are like, okay, dog, it's fine. Zananza was kind of a retard anyway. We didn't really give that much of a shit. So the point is that essentially went nowhere. So later, Horemheb, when Tutankhamun dies, he himself marries Enikas and Amun, and he becomes the pharaoh Horemheb, the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. And he appoints as his successor his grand vizier. His grand vizier was named Ramses. And this grand vizier became Ramses the first king of the 19th dynasty. Okay? So then you have Ramses the first, you have Ramses the second.
Was that a bloodline?
Yes. At this point, yes, it was a bloodline. The Ramessides were a bloodline. Horemheb didn't have any kids. He didn't have any issue to speak of. The previous dynasty had died out.
Sounds like somebody I know.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Apparently Horemheb's major concern was the continuation of of Egypt itself. He served the state. So he announces his successor, Ramses the First. Ramses the First, of course, had his son, Ramses the Second. Ramses the Second eventually defeats the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Let's say Ramses the First had a daughter. Would she have been?
He did have a daughter. He had many daughters.
But let's say, was it a firstborn?
It was male line succession.
Male only.
Yes.
So if he had only daughters,
if he had only daughters, he would have married one of the daughters to another prince, and that son would have been the new pharaoh. Yes. Male primogeniture.
Do you know? And I'm just
hit me. Yeah,
splitting straws here.
Sure.
Would that dude have taken on the name of Ramses?
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Oh,
yes.
All right.
Ramses the Third. Okay. See. Okay. Now we get into the period where Menelaus and Helen show up on the island of Pharos. Okay, because the 20th dynasty, the queen. I had it written down. The queen of the 20th dynasty was named. Oh, shoot. The last queen of the 20th dynasty. Oh, crap. I'm looking it up. I'm sorry. Okay, because I thought I had that written down, but apparently I didn't. So there was some dynastic instability at the end of the 20th dynasty. And was it Husret? The 20th dynasty actually ends at the terminal period of the Bronze Age collapse, which was the eruption of the volcano Thera. Okay, so the 19th dynasty. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look up the 19th dynasty. Okay, because that's the one that we're talking about. All right, 19th dynasty of Egypt. Okay, here we go. Founded by Grand Vizier Ramses the First. Okay, the last queen, the last ruler of the 19th dynasty was Twasret. And so apparently there were there was some mysterious circumstances surrounding her death. The records are a little inconclusive, but what we do know is that apparently the successor of Tuasret, sorry, the first pharaoh of the 20th dynasty was a Thracian named Setnakte. Okay, now Setnakte, as I said, he's somehow associated with either Thrace or Rhodos, the island, an island in Greece. Okay, and it is in this period where Menelaus shows up supposedly with Helen. All right. Now we get into some very murky territory. Okay, because according to Herodotus, the Greek historian from around the 500 BC, who was the famous chronicler of the Peloponnesian War. All right. Herodotus visited Egypt and was told by the priests of the temple of Aphrodite, which was maintained by Egyptians, where it was called the Temple of Aphrodite, that in fact, Helen had never actually gone to Troy. All right. And Herodotus, he was listening to these people, he wrote it all down, that according to the story, all right, after after Helen is abducted by Paris, they spend some time in Egypt hiding out from the Greeks. And for one reason or another, the pharaoh at the time, who presumably was Setnakte, prevents her from leaving. So Paris is like, fuck it, and he supposedly takes a, quote, projection, unquote, of Helen off with him to Troy. And this is where we get very murky, because according to Euripides, what happened is that like I said, the original Helen abided in Egypt during the entire Trojan War. She never left, according to Euripides. And okay, the Greeks. So my conclusion is this. Okay, so the idea that Helen stayed in Egypt, well, it seems a little fishy. Okay. So my position here is that here's what happened. Here's the narrative. Okay, is that Helen goes off with Paris. Okay, the whole thing about or Diphobos. See, the thing is, after Paris dies at the hands of Philoctetes, supposedly Helen is then married off to Diphobos, who's another brother of Hector and a brother of Paris. Okay, and apparently she's not especially happy about it, but at this point her fate is out of her hands. So for all we know, she was perfectly happy to get back together with Menelaus. Who knows? But maybe that's all wrong. Maybe all this was invented after the fact. And Helen goes off with Paris as in the movie Troy. Okay, and I'm saying right here that maybe the perspective that I should be arguing is what is in Christopher Nolan's mind when he's making this movie. Is this movie, in fact, not just Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, but it is, in fact, a direct sequel to the movie Troy by Wolfgang Petersen? That Diane Kruger is, in fact, Helen, and she goes off with Paris. Meanwhile, but again, Menelaus, he's dead, of course, in the movie also, so that kind of ruins that. But for instance, supposedly though, all right, Menelaus comes to Egypt, all right, and according to the story, Menelaus is stuck in Egypt, but he is helped by the wife of Setnakte named Idothea, okay, and Setnakte is identified with Proteus, okay, the Greek god of the winds. Homer calls him the old man of the sea.
Proteus.
Supposedly Proteus, the Greek god of the winds, well, he's a shapeshifter.
Never heard that.
Well, the thing is, Proteus, according to the story, when Idothea, the mother of Theanoe, and also apparently the mother of Ramses III, whereas Setnakte is, like I said, is identified with the old man of the sea, according to Homer, and the god Proteus, possibly because at this point the 20th dynasty has the Mediterranean's largest standing navy. Okay, so and again, according to Homer and the epic cycle, Menelaus is told that is to say, Setnakte is kind of in semi-retirement, in seclusion on the island of Pharos, or no, not the island of Pharos, Yeah, maybe it is the Isle of Paradise. Anyway, so Idothea tells Menelaus, or Idothea and Theanoe tells Menelaus how to capture him because he knows the way out of the Nile Delta and back to Greece. So supposedly Menelaus grabs him, and while he grabs him, Proteus shapeshifts into many different creatures and ultimately turns into his human form and reveals to Menelaus the way back to Greece. So at that point, Menelaus sails back to Greece, supposedly with Helen, and later, I got a little ahead of myself. So with Seknakte went into semi-retirement on the island of Pharos, he left his son Theoclymenus. Okay, now Theoclymenus, which is what the Greeks called Ramses III. Okay, so Ramses III is in charge. He doesn't want Helen to leave. Okay, according to Euripides in the play Helen, he doesn't want Helen to leave. Okay, so he's trying to keep Helen. It's Menelaus who captures Proteus and tells him the way to escape. Helen and Menelaus escape. Idothea and Theanoe, the mother and daughter, Ramses III's wife and his daughter, are imprisoned and later rescued by Castor and Pollux, the two brothers of Helen of Troy, who were called the God dang it. Castor and Pollux were two famous Greek heroes who were the brother and sister of Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra. And they were called the Dioscuri. They basically were twin heroes. They did everything together. They battled together. They did all this stuff together. They were also called the Polydeuces. Anyway. Okay, so here's the thing. Now, why would Menelaus, why would he go to all this trouble? And I'll tell you why. Menelaus went to all this trouble because he wanted to preserve.
That's a damn good question.
Yes, it is. I'm about to get that. Because Menelaus had been sworn by all the other Greek kings, okay, to support the marriage between Menelaus and Helen. So if he goes back without Helen, there's no vow. There's nothing keeping them all together. But if he goes back with Helen, they're still bound by the same vow that had them launch the 1,000 ships to Troy. Okay, so Menelaus needs a Helen in order to preserve his right to call upon the other Greeks for support in the event of war. And now with Agamemnon dead, he is the senior king in the house of. He is the senior member of the house of Atreus, and thus the overlord of all the other Greek kingdoms. He's in charge. Now, so my conclusion here is the Greeks invented the story of the fake Helen so that Menelaus would not lose face for failing to fulfill his oath to restore Helen. However, and again, Herodotus himself apparently interviewed the priests of the Temple of Aphrodite in Memphis personally, who attested to him that, in fact, Helen of Troy was in Egypt the whole time. According to Euripides, the Greeks attacked Troy anyway because they refused to believe that she was in Memphis the whole time, or they didn't want a war with the Egyptians because the Egyptians had a powerful standing navy. Okay. So how would this work in real life? Menelaus, okay, comes to Egypt, okay. He is arguably ethnically related to the pharaoh Seknakte, all right. He rises high in Seknakte's service as a mariner. He helps build his navy. He helps maintain his navy, and he has insight into all the other peoples of the Mediterranean. Okay. So then Seknakte retires, all right. Seknakte retires, and Theoclymenus takes over. Now, Theoclymenus, of course, who's Ramses II, he doesn't particularly like Menelaus because Menelaus was tight with his dad, and he's part of the old guard. Ramses III wants to bring up the new guard, okay? And not only that, rumors start spreading in Egypt, and again, this is speculation. Rumors start spreading in Egypt about the fact that Menelaus had a hand in the sacrifice of Iphigenia. And the Egyptians were not especially happy with the idea of human sacrifice. That, of course, didn't stop them from burying their kings with all their slaves and all their household servants and all their cats and their pets and shit. But the idea of sacrificing to the gods, sacrificing a human being to the gods was considered offensive to the gods. So Menelaus decides, I'm going to get the hell out of here and go back to Greece, but they don't want him to let him leave. So Princess Theonoe, who he's kind of sweet on, helps him. He takes her with him. They go back to Greece. Okay. Now this seems a little fanciful. Okay. But, okay. So this seems a little fanciful, but all the authors who discuss this story, for instance, the first one was Stesichorus from the 600s BC. Okay, he was the author of a series of poems called the Palinodes. All right, and he is like, he writes a couple of poems where Helen is a complete bitch. All right, but then supposedly he's visited by a Greek lyric poet. Oh, okay. According to Pausanias, after he wrote this poem, he was struck blind. Okay, but then he writes another poem where Helen is virtuous, where she's nice, where she's good, where she's all this, and supposedly she sees again. Now the story is that apparently, tin from the Phoenicians. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up. So Stesichorus was supposedly visited by a pilgrim from Asia Minor, okay? And supposedly this pilgrim told him the real story, whatever that is. His opposition tired. Blindness he is said to have incurred and cured by composing verses, first insulting and then flattering to Helen of Troy. All right, so chronology. Recovered his sight after recovering it, called Stesichorus because the first was blah, 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 blah. His poems are in the Doric alphabet in 26 books. They say he was blinded for writing abuse of Helen and recovered his sight after writing an encomium of Helen, the Palinode, the result of a dream. Supposedly he met a pilgrim from Asia Minor who informed him of the true circumstances of the story, and the whole being struck blind could be an allegory for where he didn't see the truth. Okay? But there might be another meaning to that entirely, and I'm about to get to that. Okay? So, all right. So anyway, so that is my proposition, that Helen was an Egyptian princess, Theonoe, the sister of Ramses II, that Menelaus met when he was serving her father, King Seknakte in Egypt. And then when Seknakte retired, he had to get out while the getting was good, and both Idothea and Theonoe helped him escape. That is my thesis. Meanwhile, the Greeks claimed that it was the real Helen because that way Menelaus doesn't lose face. That way he maintains the alliance, and everything's fine. Nobody gets hurt. It's a convenient fiction. And besides, again, perhaps Black Helen was really, really nice, and of course, White Helen was kind of a bitch. Because, again, when Telemachus visits them, he sees a very happy and harmonious household, despite the verbal sparring match that they engage in. But in fact, if they're both secretly engaged in a sort of smirking insult of the actual Helen, then it makes a lot more sense. Now, here's the thing. So then we have to decide, were the Egyptians black? Now, here's the thing. Okay, did the Egyptians look like Lupita Nyongo? Now, here's the thing. I was actually discussing this in the break room, and I was saying that Lupita Nyongo was actually a different Helen of Troy, and that she was actually Egyptian, and thus being black was appropriate. Owen Enabulele, his former and my current Nigerian co-worker, turns to me and says, "You got to prove they're black first, Bob." And I was like, okay, well, here's the deal. The Egyptians were at a crossroads of civilization, okay? The short answer, yes, they were black. The long answer, they were kind of, all right? During the dynasty in question, okay, they were, at this point, they had been the crossroads of civilization for a long time. Yvonne van Sertova did an ethnographic study of something like 50,000 Egyptian skulls in various tombs and noted that they had visibly African features. Later during the 25th dynasty, when Herodotus visits Egypt, the Egyptians at that point are ruled by the Nubians. And if you've ever seen a Nubian, they're black as hell. They look like freaking burn victims. No offense. I mean, they're black. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is kind of. The problem is that later you had that Netflix show where Cleopatra was portrayed as black. And that's not true at all. Cleopatra was Greek. They were all the rulers of all the former territories of Alexandria, all the former territories of Alexander the Great, were all descendants of Alexander's generals, called the Diadochi. And the dynasty of Egypt, again in the Ptolemaic period, they were probably visibly white, while their subjects were, brown. However, the rulers in the 19th and 20th dynasty were probably fairly brown. Maybe they were black. Who knows? However, okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of the story. In the last 5 to 10 years, the last 15 at the most, we have actually made many very interesting discoveries in archaeology regarding who I mentioned earlier, the Hittites. All right. Now, the Hittites were a major Indo-European civilization who lived in Asia Minor. They were strong warriors. They shared our Indo-European values. They believed in, family, strength, courage in battle, independence and freedom, all that other stuff. And they used iron. They were one of the first cultures historically to use iron weapons. Again, not because iron was superior, but because iron was cheap and they were able to outfit their soldiers quickly, while they were able to sell bronze weapons to a considerable profit toward other cultures. So where were the Hittites during the Trojan War? Supposedly you had all these Greeks attacking a city in Asia Minor. Were the Greeks not involved? Well, here we come to the point where literally everything I just talked about, everything about Egypt, everything about Greece, all this other stuff, I basically tear it all down. So let me introduce you to a book called The Annals of Mercilus. Okay? Not Merciless, but Mercilus. Mursilas. He was one of the great Hittite kings following the reign of the Suppiluliumii. That's not really what they were called, the Suppiluliumices, okay? During the time of the Trojan War, or what we think was the Trojan War, the Hittites were a major empire, okay? However, they vied for control of the Aegean Sea with a group that they called the Achiawa, all right? Now, the Achiawa, of course, was the Hittite word for the Achaeans, the Greeks, all right? And in particular, the rulers of the Greeks at this time were a people called a house called the Atarchia. Now, the Atarchia, that is the Hittite word for the house of Atreus, the Atreides. Okay? Now, let me forewarn you that while all these names sound weird and extremely foreign, the Hittites were more closely ethnically related to you and me than the Bronze Age Greeks were. They were, as I said, Indo-Europeans. They looked a lot like us. Anyway, so at the time, you had the Hittites in the center. You had the Greeks, who had their commercial empire in the Aegean and the Attic Peninsula, and maybe with Italy and Spain under the city of Tartessos. Okay, and a great deal of it was moving tin. Meanwhile, to the right, you had the Assyrians. Okay, I should say, I'm not to the right. To the east, the Hittites bordered on the Assyrians and the Mitanni. Now, the Mitanni were an Indo-Iranian people related to the Zoroastrians, or historically the Indo-Iranian cultures that eventually produced the prophet Zoroaster. And beyond that, you had the Assyrians. Now, the Assyrians were a Semitic people. Okay, they were ethnically related to the ancient Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians. All right. But now, according to the Annals of Mercilus, okay, and this is corroborated by many Hittite sources, is that historically speaking, in the western part of Anatolia, of Asia Minor, there was a ethnic group called the Luwians. All right. Now, the Luwians may or may not have been an Indo-European people. We're not 100% sure. Okay. They spoke a language that was related, as far as we know, to Bronze Age Greek. From what we have been able to decipher from their written language, which is called Linear B, which I should note has no relation to the modern Greek alphabet whatsoever. The modern Greek alphabet is taken from the Phoenician alphabet, who they had long-term contact with. It was the Phoenicians who restored Mediterranean trade after the eruption of the volcano Thera and the end of Bronze Age civilization. Now then, so the Luwians were several small little statelets that the Hittites used basically as a buffer state between them and the rest of Europe. And they kept them separate. However, one day, the Luwians decided to band together and to found their own kingdom called Arzawa. And so you had the king of Arzawa and the kings, I forget who the name of the particular king of Arzawa was. I think it's not 100% relevant. Anyway, so the Hittites intervene with the support of several of their other allied Luwian kingdoms, including Vilusa, which is the Hittite word for Ilios, which is a word for the city that was the capital of the country of Troy in the story. Now, so the son of the king of Arzawa, who's now deposed, was a war leader named Piyamaradu. All right. Now, Piyamaradu, basically, him and his entire court are in exile, and they're given an island by their allies, the Greeks, the Bronze Age Greeks, the Atarcia, the House of Atreus, the Achaeans. Okay. And because at this point the Achaeans are in kind of a cold war with the Hittites, because any open war between the two would probably result in the destruction of both of their civilizations. They sort of have this cold war going on where the Greeks do not attack the Hittites directly, and the Hittites won't attack the Greeks directly. So Piyamaradu sets up his own island. He's set up on his own island, and he uses it to foment rebellion among the Luwian communities of Asia Minor, and even establishes a Greek colony, which the Hittites call Milowana, but the Greeks call Miletus. All right. Now, Piyamaradu, his life, the life of Piyamaradu, mimics the life of Achilles very closely. Okay, so much so that I do not feel particularly self-conscious when I say that Piyamaradu was, in fact, the historical inspiration for Achilles. I'm going to say it. Yes, Piyamaradu was Achilles. The story of historical Achilles in the Iliad and the Odyssey were dimly remembered memories of a Luwian war leader who was in the patronage of Agamemnon, who was the head of the House of Atreus and the overlord of the Greek city-states. And Piyamaradu, he went full ham. Okay, he fought wars, he destroyed shit, he tore the shit up. He was a bad motherfucker. He also married his daughter to one of the Luwian kings, and and one of the things that sort of matches up very closely with that of Achilles is that he sacked the island of Lesbos, which the Hittites called Laz, specifically because of the hot chicks. Lesbos was apparently famous not only for their hot women, but for their interesting sisterhood rituals. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So, I'm almost done. So, meanwhile, the king of Vilusa, that is to say, the king of Ilios, aka Troy, all right, what we know of as Troy, which was a guy named Alexandru. Now, Alexandru is, of course, the Hittite rendering of Alexander, which was the name of Paris when he was just a shepherd. Homer calls him Alexander and Paris interchangeably, and in fact, the Torjumana saga in Iceland refers to him as Alexander the whole way through. Okay, so Alexander was a Greek king of a Luwian city who was a client of the king of the Hittites. Meanwhile, Piyamaradu was a Luwian warlord in the patronage of the king of the Greeks and an enemy of the Hittites. So when Piyamaradu and Alexander of Troy, when they clashed, which at one point they did, supposedly in what was it, 1230 BC, something like that. When they clashed, there was a bit of a juxtaposition. Okay, you had a Greek king of a city enthralled to the Hittites. You had a Luwian warlord in the pay of the Greeks, and because of the fact that the Greeks and the Hittites could not attack each other directly, and all the other Luwian states were in the pay of the Hittites, where does Piyamaradu go to attack Wilusa? Well, he goes to the Greeks. And the Greeks launch their navy to support Piyamaradu as he attacks Troy and sacks the city.
So here come the warbirds.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly what happens. So, but the thing is, there's no mention of Helen of Troy anywhere in the annals of Marcellus. All right. Now, what if, and here's my final thought here. What if Helen of Troy wasn't a real woman? What if Helen of Troy was a metaphor, okay, for power, for kingship, for glory, for the divine right to rule? You had Piyamaradu, who was stateless, a prince of a kingdom that no longer existed, fighting against a warlord who had wandered in and taken control of an ancient Luwian city with Hittite support. And the two of them, when the two of them clashed, it was in a way not just personal, it was also symbolic. And what they clashed over wasn't an actual female, it was the idea of kingship, of power, of the divine right to rule, of being the best, of being extraordinary.
The head honcho.
The head honcho. The top dog. The big dog in the yard. And to many men, that is more beautiful, more attractive, more glorious than any woman. And that is why it's completely irrelevant if Lupita Nyongo is Helen of Troy or not, because she was a metaphor the whole time. And in fact, the Odyssey, here's the thing, the Iliad and the Odyssey, as I said, the Iliad, they were probably sort of a collection of values that the Greeks held in common. It was like the Bible. It was sort of their family book. Whereas the Odyssey, and the thing is, the Odyssey, some scholars have suggested that the Odyssey is meant to describe the chaos of Greece and the Mediterranean following the eruption of the volcano Thera, that all these monsters, all this horror, all this weirdness that Odysseus is encountering are, in a way, they're allegories or metaphors for what the Greeks actually encountered after the collapse of their civilization. That it was all this post-apocalyptic wasteland where everybody crowded together around the fire in fear of the horrors and terrors. And because, well, for one thing, Circe, all right? Circe uses drugs to turn men into animals. Believe it or not, all the Indo-European warrior cults, many of them believed that they adopted a totemic animal because they used to imbibe a fungus called ergot, okay? And the fungus apparently gave them violent hallucinations and delusions, in some cases that they thought they were animals. And they said, you know, if you see yourself as an animal in your dreams, that is your animal totem, okay? That is the warrior cult you follow. So if you think you're a bear, then you join the cult of the bear. And so the story of Circe in the Odyssey, where she may very well have been an Indo-European priestess, like the Vikings had, who administered ergotized fungus to the warriors and turned them into animals.
I like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the way academia is now is that I was having a conversation about this with somebody online and who was in college at the time, and she said, "Oh no, it's just a story. It's just a story about the strangeness of foreign women." And I'm like, "You don't think it has any symbolic value whatsoever?" And she's like, "No, that's all discounted." And I was like, "Well, how exactly was it discounted?" And they said, "Oh, the professors, that's just how it's taught by the professors these days. They just sat around in a circle and decided, much like the ancient Greeks, who famously would sit around in a circle and explain how many teeth a horse had by philosophical allusion and long diatribes and inductive reasoning, as opposed to actually going and looking in the horse's mouth." But yeah, so ultimately, yeah, that's basically the end of my thesis. That Helen was not uh, Helen was not a person. She was a metaphor for power. She was a metaphor for greatness. And so the idea that, and this is actually a little sinister if you take that to its logical conclusion, the idea that they would put Lupita Nyongo as Helen of Troy is kind of a message which says, by the, shall we say, the intellectual liberati of our mass market popular culture, it's kind of like they're saying we're in charge. We decide. We're the top dog, which is, it's a little bit sinister. We'll take everything you value and we'll destroy it because we can. We'll tear it down just like Achilles tore down the walls of Troy because he had no choice. He was destined. He was a warrior. He had to embrace his fate. And yeah, that's basically it. That is everything. I got everything. Thank you, Miles. What do you think? Any comments, ideas, suggestions?
Nah.
No, yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been with us this far, thank you for joining us for the Revenant podcast. I'm the Goon, and this is the Revenant. We are your hosts. It has, I hope it's been a pleasure listening to me talk for however long it's been. And we will see you next time. Finger guns. Ah.